need this. I need this road runner. All right. The meeting will come to order. We have a lot on our plate tonight. I would urge everyone on the committee and off the committee to be as brief as you can in your comments, because we've got a lot to do. First thing on the agenda was going to be the road runoff subcommittee presentation. I was the road runoff subcommittee, and my efforts consisted of going to the DPW with Steve and talking to them about Little Pond and what they thought could be done there. We got an amazing amount of good information back from them, the thrust of which is, as we've all discovered about everything, it's more complicated than you thought. So they recommended that we get an expert in the field to give us more of a briefing about the alternatives that are available for road runoff, and Scott Horsley's firm appears to be the experts in the field, at least in our neighborhood, and he was very accommodating. And when I called on Monday to see if he could come here on Thursday, he didn't say no. So we have a Cape Cod firm who has not only done this kind of work, knows the Little Pond area intimately, and has actually come up with some innovative green techniques on dealing with wastewater, road runoff. And so without further ado, I will let Scott take it over, and thank you.
All right, thanks, Eric. And I know you have a lot on your agenda, and I will try to be concise here. I probably have too many slides, but I'll go through some of them rather quickly because I wasn't exactly sure of the focus. So we can move through them, and if you want to slow down and stop on something, by all means. Should we leave the lights on, or what's your format here?
Yeah, leave.
Like that? Okay, we'll see how they do. So I threw in a slide, a Little Pond, because that was mentioned in the letter, and I will say I'm not sure I'm intimately familiar with it, but I'm familiar with the area, and I'd also add that Rob Adler's here from EPA, and most of the work we do is for EPA. We have long-term contracts with them, so we're working all over the place doing this kind of stuff, and most of the examples I threw in tonight are from Massachusetts, but we've been designing these things I'm going to talk about, like bioretention system as far away as Guam. Again, under contract with EPA. So a lot of the things I'm going to talk about here are really going on in lots of places. Now, looking at Little Pond specifically, the first thing that strikes me is for a fairly rural suburban area, there's a lot of impervious surface there. According to the Mass GIS, is about 30% of that watershed or that groundwater drainage area, and this is the drainage area that's identified in the MEP report, by the way, is impervious surface. So certainly at the outset, just looking at that level, there's a significant hydrologic alteration there, meaning how water is moving through that watershed, and I'll touch on that, and certainly a significant sort of water quality change as well. Okay. So we think about stormwater runoff, and sometimes very dramatic things happen. Historically, we've thought about flood control and erosion. That's not really going to be the focus tonight, but we are going to be talking about what happens oftentimes when we're inside, what's going on outside during the stormwater. And one thing we do see is a lot of turbidity and silt in that stormwater. Sometimes we see the sheens caused by hydrocarbons. And one of the points I want to make at the beginning of this, I know the focus of a lot of the water quality committees upstairs is nitrogen, but there's a lot more to talk about in stormwater than nitrogen. So I think if that gets prioritized as one of the programs in the town, we should keep in mind that there are many, many other benefits to addressing the stormwater concern. And Rob's agency, as you know, is also running a regulatory program intimately known as the MS4 program that Falmouth is part of. So you're going to be addressing these issues anyways. So I think there's a double benefit here. Even if you decide that, well, this is maybe the third or fourth ranked nitrogen removal technique, it's something you're going to be having to address through this NPDES MS4 program. Anyway, so you get a double bang for your buck. So I think it's a very appropriate subject. Now, the other thing I'll mention is Falmouth is, according to EPA's definition, an urbanized community. In my book, it's kind of suburbanized. You have some open drainage, some closed drainage. Closed drainage systems refer to where you have inlets and catch basins, and that water is actually piped to the receiving water. In many other areas, you simply have runoff off the sides of the road, In other cases, you had infiltrating or leaching catch basins. So there's a whole bunch of different types of infrastructure to think about in terms of how the stormwater gets from the roads and from the receiving waters to the, and the contributing areas to the receiving waters. Again, I just want to stress, I think the focus, or what I was asked to talk about, is nitrogen, but again, I want to say there's a lot of things here. One of the unique things about stormwater that makes it even more problematic than raw wastewater is the variety of pollutants that we're dealing with. And I did throw in just a couple slides from a very well-noted study in Wisconsin that looked at what is in stormwater. They took samples throughout the entire state of Wisconsin, and this is the frequency at which they found a variety of different pesticides, and I'm just realizing the formatting knocked out my list of pesticides on the bottom, but I will tell you that 2,4-D is over here on the right 67% of the time. DDT is still showing up some 30 years, 40 years after it's been taken off the market, and that was about 29% of the time. I happen to remember some of these, and I apologize. In fact, I'm going to skip past these because my nomenclature on the bottom didn't get formatted when I brought it over here, but I can tell you these 5 metals, chromium, copper, zinc, lead, again, 98% of the samples that they took throughout the state of Wisconsin, which I think would be exemplary of what you're seeing here in Massachusetts. There is also a whole range, use this instead, okay? There's also a whole range of polyaromatic hydrocarbons, PCBs, etc. So again, the only point of these slides is to reinforce my first point, and that is there's a lot here to deal with. Okay, so the second thing I want to mention is to go back to what I said initially with the hydrologic changes with stormwater. I have 2 slides here, and what I want to do is contrast natural conditions to the urbanized landscape. Now again, these numbers are not specific to Falmouth, but they're not too far off. You get about 44 inches of precipitation. These are really meant to be statewide in Massachusetts. About half of that, or a little less than half of that, is returned to the atmosphere via evapotranspiration. Now, on the Cape Cod, we get a lot of recharge. This number says 20 inches per year. The official Falmouth number that's used in the MEP studies is 27, so it's a little higher than that, with very little surface runoff, okay? So what happens is when we develop the landscape with impervious surfaces, there are a couple of major changes. First of all, we cut down trees, so the evapotranspiration goes away. Okay, so we have more water to deal with than we did naturally. The second thing that happens, we have a lot more surface runoff, and depending on how we manage the stormwater, perhaps less groundwater recharge. Now that does play directly into how the MEP model works in terms of how much groundwater discharges to the receiving ponds, what the so-called flushing rate is. That's the number John Ramsey uses when he does his flushing rates in the estuaries. He assumes a certain amount of groundwater discharge. And the point I want to make here tonight is when you urbanize the landscape within that watershed, then you do A or B with the stormwater, you change that. And you can, the other point I want to make is when we talk about stormwater solutions, we can change it again in terms of the amount of groundwater recharge, which is going to directly result in how much discharge goes to the estuaries. So here's a picture of what it might look like post-development, and frankly, this is probably more representative of this watershed, which, as you can see from the first slide, is pretty well urbanized. So we have houses and roofs. A lot of that water can be or is directly infiltrated into the subsurface. So if you remember the natural recharge rate, 20 inches per year, or if you use the Falmouth rate, 27 inches per year, that goes to as high as 40 inches per year if we infiltrate rooftop runoff directly. And by the way, that is allowed under the Massachusetts state stormwater policy. In fact, it's encouraged to infiltrate the roof runoff directly with or without treatment. Roads and parking lots can also be infiltrated, but they're required to be treated somehow, and that's going to be a lead into what I'm going to talk about in terms of the type of treatment that we typically design that we think works the best, and those are vegetated systems. So this cartoon is showing what we call a bioretention area. The stormwater would first go to the bioretention and then again go into the soils. Again, 30 inches per year is still at a higher rate than the natural rate. So the take home from this is on the hydrologic change, if we design it, I would say appropriately, treat it and put it in the ground. Treat it with vegetated systems and put it in the ground. We're going to end up with more groundwater recharge in that watershed than occurred before anything was built. And that is going to result in more groundwater discharge to the estuary. And that is going to result in a higher flushing rate. And that's going to affect the nitrogen concentrations. So what I'm trying to say here is, when we think about stormwater management, we're going to talk about removal rates, attenuation, but we're also playing with the hydrology, whether we know it or not, whether we calculate it or not, we are. We're going to change the flushing rate of that estuary by how we manage stormwater. And I view that as an opportunity. So that's my basic point there, and perhaps we can come back to that later. Okay, so the next part of the presentation is really just going to take you through, and I handed out, there's a few more copies here I'm noticing that maybe didn't make it all the way around the room, some pictures of some of these systems that we are currently using, and I know EPA is promoting nationally now, and many other organizations, nonprofits, universities, notably the University of New Hampshire Stormwater Center, which has turned out to be a major sort of research organization, the types of systems that are sort of best being used. I am not going to go through all of these. What I am going to focus on again is some of the vegetated systems like the bioretention, the constructed wetlands, the grass swales that I think have great application in this watershed. Another one which I do have a couple slides of that might have application are green roofs. A significant percentage of the nitrogen that gets into the estuaries is falling out of the sky here. There's a lot of nitrogen in our rainfall, and that can be treated with a green roof, in addition to some energy benefits to homes as well. So it is a technology that probably has some applicability in these watersheds. So how do you infiltrate roof runoff directly? A real simple method, and again, it's used on Cape Cod quite a bit. Infiltrating it directly with open catch basins like the one shown here in the lower right. The key here is disconnecting impervious surfaces. That's one of sort of the rules, if you will, of this so-called low impact development design technique. And that means the worst case situation is to have the roof, have a gutter from the roof go into the driveway, have the driveway drain into the road, and then it's the town's property. Then it becomes the town MS4 stormwater system, and the town is not only treating their roads, but they're treating everybody's roof and driveways and gardens and lawns that flow into that. So one of the tricks here that is generally recommended with managing a watershed using this low impact development technique is disconnecting impervious surfaces, breaking them up into small parts, and treating them individually. And what I'm going to get to is treating an individual residential roof on the lot. Don't put it in the town street system, infiltrate it there, or run it into a rain garden. Treat the runoff from the front lawn of the house there. Don't put it in the MS4 program and multiply the town's problem. That's kind of the approach that we're recommending here. Another technique is permeable pavement. This stuff is becoming a lot more affordable. When it first came on the market, it was 3 or 4 times more expensive than conventional asphalt or pavement. Now it's gotten down to less than twice as expensive. I know that still sounds like a lot, but in some cases I've heard numbers as low as 30 or 40% higher than regular pavement. So it's getting close. And again, comparing that to how you otherwise might manage that stormwater, it can be a really nice technique to be using in certain areas, not everywhere. UNH, again, University of New Hampshire, is really the authority in New England. They've published a whole bunch of how-to manuals, technical manuals on how to design and construct permeable pavement so that it works year-round. It doesn't freeze. You don't have frost problems. It can be easily maintained if it's designed correctly. And if you want the answers on how to do that, and you want the case studies proving that it works, go to the UNH Stormwater Center website and look at that. They also have a little video that shows in the middle of January, they got a bunch of DPW directors out there who say, heard about this stuff, but it doesn't work in the winter because you get frost and it doesn't work. They always plan it when it's 6 or 10 degrees in the middle of the winter, get them in a circle in the parking lot, and they pour a few gallons of water in the parking lot, and it goes right into the ground. They go, wow, it works. And again, it all has to do with sort of the substructure and how it's designed, but these guys have figured it out. So that is a viable technology, again, if the goal is to get more water in the ground, to increase the recharge rate, to increase the flushing rate in the estuary, that works. Some of these techniques are very simple, and people ask, to fast forward, well, what does this stuff cost? There are studies, in fact, EPA has published some very good studies nationally comparing this type of development to what we call conventional development. And there's a range. It's maybe some cases 5%, 10% more. In our experience, it's either the same or less cost to construct. I mean, where is the materials and construction costs in a grass swale compared to a closed drainage system where you're collecting water subsurface and piping? This is less expensive. Generally, the only extra expenses are the design fees by the engineering firms, because most engineering firms are not used to doing that. So they can't take a template off the wall, if you will, on their computer and just throw that into the next subdivision. They have to design something. So that's sometimes where the cost comes in doing this a little differently. But on the construction side, this stuff is pretty darn cheap. As one of my clients, Tony Green at the Pine Hills, says, this stuff is dirt cheap because we're moving dirt around, and that's compared to other sophisticated technology and structures, that's pretty cheap. So grass swales is one of them, and again, there's some performance data that I'll show you a little bit later. The real workhorse here is this technology called bioretention. And generically, these are depressions in the landscape. There's commonly a soil matrix that's specified, a so-called engineered soil. They can be lined with a waterproof liner, or they can be open in the bottom, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. That cartoon I showed you earlier did not have a liner because we were trying to get the treated water into the subsurface, and my quick guess is that's probably the better technology here. It's also less expensive because you don't have to put a liner in. Typically, when we design systems downtown Providence or in cities on contaminated soils, we have to put a liner in and then pipe the water someplace else. So in this case, bioretention probably can be pretty simple. Again, just specified soils, and specifying plants is very important because only certain plants work in these systems. It's a unique hydrologic environment. They get flooded and then they go to drought conditions. Those are not wetland plants. Obligate wetland plants need to be wet all the time. So these are unique plants, and there's a lot of people have been researching with this in terms of specifying the right ones. Bioretention can either be built with new construction or it can be retrofits. In many cities now, they've gone out, I think this is Baltimore, where they've gone in and actually dug up old roads and put in bioretention along the road as sort of a retrofit kind of a system. And as you can see on this picture on the right, the way these things work is during the rainfall, they fill with water, typically pretty shallow. The ponding is on the order of maybe 6 inches, 12 inches, in some cases as much as 2 feet. And then the water percolates down through the soil. And the treatment mechanism here, by the way, is not really the plants themselves or the soil. It's the microorganisms that grow in the root zone. The gazillions of little microorganisms that are attached to the root zone really do a phenomenal job of doing things like nitrification, denitrification, which is one of our focuses here. But they also break down hydrocarbons. They remove pathogens. There's a lot of magic going on in that root zone. It's really valuable. So basically, the rule of thumb is if you can get a hardy plant population growing in these systems, you're going to get microorganisms to inhabit the root zone, and you're probably going to get pretty good darn treatment. That's kind of what we're finding out with a lot of the research. The state of Massachusetts has guidelines and criteria on how to build these, and one of the criteria includes that thing has to drain within 48 hours. And that gets to the specification of the soil, media, etc. And the reason for that is twofold. Number one is we get a rainfall event on average once every 3 days in New England. So you got to be ready for the next rain event. The other one is mosquitoes. We don't want to create mosquito habitats. And they have a 48-hour gestation period, so 48 to 72 hours max is the guideline. And again, that's important to sort of get that down. We've already talked about that. Past that. Another picture of a bioretention system. Again, they can be incorporated with sidewalks. They can look pretty good. And you know, one of the things we notice all the time, you drive around and you look at people put these vegetated islands in parking lots, new commercial developments. Almost every time you see one, they're elevated. Well, that's a run-on device. If you're going to rain on that thing, that's going to go onto the parking lot. If you simply depress that, that would then be a vegetated soil or bioretention system. What is the cost of a depressed vegetated island compared to one that's higher? I think it's zero. So it's just a matter of changing the topography, and you've probably created a pretty effective treatment mechanism. In this case, this is where the inlet is. It's a very simple surface inlet into this bioretention system. Again, this is in a fairly urbanized environment. Again, a picture, this is back in Baltimore where they're doing the retrofits, and they're finding that in some cases, you know, if they do this right, the landscaping actually sort of is a net plus aesthetics and can actually enhance real estate values. Here's one at a shopping plaza along that green strip. Again, commonly we see that as a grassed area that's raised, really not providing any water quality function. This one is. Vegetated filter strips is another simple technique, really just providing some vegetated surface between the impervious area and the receiving water. And you'll get, if you get the plants and the root zone going there, you're going to get some treatment. I mentioned green roofs. These are very popular in Europe. I spent some time traveling in Germany a couple of years ago, and I see these very regularly. They're really not that common here, but I think they're going to get more popular. There's probably good evidence that they can enhance real estate values. People looking out these windows from offices, probably a little more pleasant working environment than looking on a black asphalt roof. There's also some heat island effect benefits to using green roofs. That's what a typical green roof surface looks like using sedums, which are the plant that's most commonly specified because they're very drought resistant, they're easy to establish, and they require minimal maintenance. Going pretty quick here, so stop me if you want to, but I'll keep moving at this pace if that's okay. This is the UNH Stormwater Center. How many people here have heard of the UNH Stormwater Center? I'm surprised. Okay. Well, write this one down. If you write down one note and one website to go to as a homework assignment from me tonight, I'm teaching tomorrow at Tufts University, so I start need to think in that mode. Go to this website and check it out. That's your homework assignment. Even better, go on a free tour. You guys been on the tour up there? No. Go on a free tour there and see this place. What they're doing is they've installed, this is the actual parking lot from UNH. They're collecting the water from that and they're draining it to, I think I've got a picture. That's the watershed boundary. Oh, I didn't put the other picture in, sorry. But there's a series of systems that they drain it to, and they put in some proprietary devices that they're testing, much like George's center up at the military base where he's testing the alternative wastewater systems. They're doing the same thing for stormwater. They've been doing it for a number of years, and they've collected what what we believe is among the best data in the country. And we've got it right here in New England. So you can go see it, and I'm going to show you some of their data of things that you could use in this watershed. So what we're looking at is that's the technique. In this case, it's a stone line swale. We've got a little picture of it. And those are the removal rates based upon probably 3 or 4 years worth of data, as I recall. They're not showing that. They're also breaking it out summer, winter, and annual. Now, as a generic comment, I've been asked many, many, many times, what happens to a vegetated in the system in the winter? It's not going to do any good because everything dies in the winter. No, plants do not die in the winter. If they're cared for properly, they hibernate somewhat. And again, the action that we're looking for is not the plant themselves, but the root zone in the subsurface. So basically what happens is the biological activity declines, but it does not go to zero. And that's evident, I think, a lot of this data that UNH has collected. So you can see the third column is the nitrogen or nitrate removal. So the first one that has that data is just a simple retention pond, which is pretty common. They're getting around, annual, about 55% removal of nitrogen using that system, which actually is pretty good.
Is your second column phosphorus?
Second column, total petroleum hydrocarbons.
Petroleum hydrocarbons.
Total suspended solids is the first one, TSS, which is the one, unfortunately I might add, the one numerical water quality standard we have for stormwater nationally, and the only one in Massachusetts so far, despite a lot of hard pushing by many people on the Stormwater Advisory Committee. The other ones are total petroleum hydrocarbons, nitrates, and zinc are the indicator standards here. Let's see, let me go to the next one. Forget about the hydrology for now. Okay, bioretention. About 50% according to these numbers. Frankly, I've seen much better removal rates in other studies on this, but those are the numbers they're reporting on here. Gravel wetland, about 80% removal for nitrogen. So wetlands are a little bit trickier to design than bioretention because now you do need to keep the plant saturated, but we can get very good nitrification, denitrification rates in a constructed wetland. So that's certainly a technique that should be considered. Next slide. Porous asphalt, no data reported on nitrogen for these two techniques, but very good removal rates for other pollutants. So again, if we're thinking more broadly, if we can accomplish infiltration either through porous asphalt or through an infiltrating system, and there's a whole bunch of them, then these can be much like the leaching field for a septic system in many cases.
Is it just because they didn't test for?
Excuse me?
Is it just because they didn't test?
I believe so. I have seen performance data on nitrogen in other studies, but they did not do it in this study, and I don't recall why at this point. And okay, so here's the tree filter, and excuse me, the sand filter on the top and tree filter on the bottom. So again, getting 50–60% removal rates for the tree filter. Looks like they didn't get a full year worth of data on the sand filter, so I'm not sure that's worth looking at for nitrogen. But again, very good removal rates for other parameters.
Where does something like the zinc go?
Metals typically get adsorbed into the soil. And over time, one of the questions that I usually get at the end of these presentations is, what's the maintenance of these things compared to other techniques? There is clearly a long-term maintenance requirement here, probably to remove and replace these soils. How long? Based upon the studies I've read, which are mostly European, because we haven't been using them here long enough, are probably on the order of decades for most systems, 10, 20, 50 years to remove the soils, okay, to replace the soils. Obviously depends on how polluted the source is. If you put these in next to a landfill or a recycling facility where there's a lot of metals, you might have to do it every 3 years. But if we're talking about rural runoff, for the watershed that we started talking about here tonight, maybe every 5 decades. I don't know. You have to probably monitor it and watch it. Other things like nitrogen and petroleum hydrocarbons are broken down to gases, so there's really no time, no buildup of those contaminants in the soils.
Roads.
Rob, I'm sorry?
Just a question about road salt and how they may affect these kinds of.
Well, again, plant selection. I've heard there is 1 or 2 species. One of them is a willow species, an Asian willow that can actually remove salt. But I've not seen any real extensive studies on that. For the most part, we're not going to remove salt, and we're not worried about that in estuary areas. But we do need to pick plants that, again, are resistant to some road salt runoff. And again, that's one of the criteria that, and you know, by the way, one of the ways, when I say we, not just our firm, but firms have been doing research in this area, have found the right plants, is to see what grows along highways. We've got a great laboratory out there, all the highways and roads. See what's growing there, because they've adapted to this environment.
Japanese knotweed.
Well, that's what we were talking about before. The plants will do it, and the soils will do it. And that's something longer term that needs to be looked at if we have a high loading of those types of pollutants, which I don't think we would have in the residential areas we're talking about here. Okay, let me keep going here. So a couple of other ways to design these things: parking lot perimeter design. So you just have runoff go off the edge of the parking lot between the curb stops into a low spot. In this watershed, we have permeable soils to begin with, but we can enhance that with even a more permeable stone kind of setting. This is what one of these might look like. You can see the sediments are accumulating right here. The runoff comes down a little bit of a grass swale into a stone infiltration area. Very simple. Again, pretty low cost. And by the way, most of these devices, or I should say all of these devices, should have what we call pre-treatment. You don't want this sediment down in there. So I doubt this was designed as pre-treatment here, but it's working. Better to have that in the parking lot and then clean it up however often you do that, or filter it out in the grass swale here before it gets down here. So you always want some kind of pre-treatment. You can use a catch basin, a standard catch basin. That's a standard accepted pre-treatment technique in the Massachusetts stormwater policy.
Just a question on the depressions. What about leaf litter and that kind of thing? Do you get issues with?
Down in here?
Well, I'm not. Well, so much in that area, right, where everything is sort of coming in.
I mean, that's part of what you're going to get going down there. Frankly, to have some organics, part of that is okay. Once the system reaches an equilibrium, it's going to break that stuff down too, to probably
Right.
the gases. That's all, organic material. It's not mineral material. It's going to be broken right down to carbon dioxide and nitrogen gas, etc. If the system's functioning properly. So generally, that's not a problem. Again, these systems can be overloaded, but in a typical setting, has not been a problem in my experience. Let's see, a couple of case studies. I just want to show you some real-life examples nearby. We worked with the Buzzards Bay program to design a system down in Marion, right down by Tabor Academy. Some of you may be familiar with this area. This is what, it was a parking lot and a lawned area right next to the harbor. They'd done some testing and found some pretty big pollutant loading there. So we designed a bioretention system here. And the nice thing about these is they really can be any shape or size. One of our favorite projects is when a client comes to us and said, we've hired 3 other firms. They've told us we can't put any bioretentions on the site. Can you take another look? We love those because we can always find a place to put them. It's easy. They can be small. You can do 20 small ones or 3 medium-sized ones, and they can be any shape, as you can see here. So this site included a bunch of these. This is what the built condition looks like. You're looking away from the water now up towards, I forget what the street that is in Marion that goes right along the water. Probably Shore Road, that's not what we usually
Water
call them. What is it?
Water Street.
Water Street. Either Water Street or Shore Road. So that's looking up towards Water Street, and that's with bioretention system that's there. And just another picture of it. So these things can look pretty attractive, and you can see this is an overflow device right here. Because you have to have pre-treatment for the first flow, then you also have to accommodate the larger storm, because these are not designed to take the 100-year flood, but they should be designed to pass the 100-year flood without damaging it. So you need a bypass or some type of overflow, and that's what that device is right there. The other thing we found, because we propose and design and build a lot of these, is photo simulation is key, especially if we're going into residential neighborhoods. We start telling the neighbors, we want to build a bunch of bioretentions down your street. Everybody's going to have a different idea what that looks like in their head, and some of them are going to vote against, some will vote for. So we recommend some photo simulations. So that was a municipal facility yard there, and you do a little photo simulation, bioretention, looks pretty good. I should also credit, we did these in concert with the Charles River Watershed Association. We've done a lot of projects with, I think their name appears in some of these. Here's another one, a little parking lot next to some ball fields. And this is what the bioretention might look like. The other thing you can do is take streets. If you don't have any place to do anything on the lawns, one option is to go onto people's properties. And oftentimes the town owns the layout. People think they own that lawn all the way to the road, but they don't, so you have the right to do it. The other way to do it is do it in the road. Many of our roads are built wider than some of us believe they need to be. So one option is to go into the road and build the bioretention there and provide some traffic calming, slow the cars down. The real traffic data that I've seen, narrower, windy roads have less accidents than wide, straight ones. Some of the data that I've seen. I know that's controversial, but I've seen some data convincing that works. And so traffic calming is an interesting issue, and they're out in Portland, Oregon, they've done this to a lot of the streets. They've narrowed them and built bioretention in the street. They've replaced the pavement. So that's an option if you don't have room. This is another one we did up in Hammond Pond behind the Chestnut Hill Mall. This one was for the Town of Newton Conservation Commission. They have runoff, if you've ever been to that back parking lot, right into Hammond Pond. Very little space, big parking lot. A lot of snow melt problems there. And a lot of these guys cause a big loading problem. So there's our bioretention design. And there's a snow storage area over here. So we wanted something special designed for that. So we designed a bunch of bioretention. That's what it looks like during construction. That's the first year planting, right next to the lawn. You can see we moved the parking lot back a little bit to give us a little room to work. So we could do this right up to the pond shoreline. That's some of the soil going in. Typically we specify, organic soil. The trick is it's got to be organic, but it's also got to be permeable. So you really balance that. Keep the geese out. Keep the geese out there. And that's the sand filter going in where the snow storage area is. So they put the snow storage right on top of the sand filter. It melts down through the sand filter and it works very, very well. That's the sand filter going in. There it is in. So one of those areas gets filled with sand, the other one's left open. Stormwater flows in where this grate is, and then flows through these holes in through the sand. And the nice thing about this is it's pretty easy to maintain. Every X number of years, either 5 years or 30 years, we don't know yet, you scoop that sand out or you vacuum it out is the quick way. It takes about think about 6 minutes to vacuum the sand out of there. If you've ever seen one of those vac trucks doing it, it's pretty impressive. So it's a pretty easy operation. And sand, again, Tony Green tells me that dirt's cheap, so I think sand's pretty cheap too. That's the hookup of the discharge system. And I think I'll stop there and see if there are questions. So I don't want to take too much more time. Yes.
Well, just wanted to sort of go back to something you said at the beginning. We are interested in nitrogen primarily because that's what got this whole thing going. But this particular water body, Little Pond, one of the other pilot projects we're doing is shellfish propagation, and we've pretty much decided that that water body is going to be the place for that. So these other things that come in with the stormwater
Might be bioaccumulated.
matter to us here.
Good point. Excellent point, yeah. And I'm glad I mentioned it then, because there's a lot of metals and hydrocarbons that, in fact, are bioaccumulated by the shellfish themselves.
Yeah.
Some of that's regulated and monitored, some of it isn't.
Yeah. One thing we discovered, when we originally thought, well, this is going to be easy because there's 4 big drains.
Yeah, I read about that in your memo.
Well, it's
yeah.
not easy because there's 4 big drains that collect stormwater from all the streets in the Heights and many of the streets in Mara Vista. But in addition to those, there are all these little side streets in Mara Vista that are just stormwater delivery systems into the pond. They are just a straight piece of asphalt that takes the water right down there. And at the other end, up by the mall, you've got the mall, and you've got a huge amount of water that's brought in from Sandwich Road and Route 28 that is also going into that pond eventually. So we've got a lot of issues at the pond, and the question is going to be, what's the biggest bang for the buck here as far as reducing the nitrogen and while we're at it, reducing these pathogens that screw up shellfish. And that's, as I've discovered, a more complicated question than we thought.
I think one of the benefits of these types of designs, again, is the size and dimensions are very flexible. So the fact that you've got many small and I'm sure variable size catchments or drainages within that basin, I think is easily accommodated and designed by these types of systems. We generally try to avoid the one large system at the end of the pipe. There's a lot of problems with that, we think. One being that what you're trying to do is capture and treat the first flush. So if you've got one big system over there, and let's say this whole room is the watershed, it's going to catch the first flush from over that side of the room. But by the time this stormwater gets there, it's going to be full of the first flush from over there.
Right.
So you don't really get to manage the whole catchment or watershed. It's better to have a bunch of systems throughout the room, and that's, again, just an approach. But the nice thing about that is we don't need a big area to build a big pond with a chain link fence around it. We can put these rain gardens in and swales and all kinds of little things. I think that's kind of the key to the success here. Yes?
In my mind, anyway, it seems to me that not enough credit is given to the amount of nitrogen in the rainwater. Do you have any guesstimate on that, percentage-wise? I mean, what it would be? I mean,
Well, the rain
it seems to be, whatever.
percentage of how much is getting into the estuary. That number's in the MEP report. George, somebody else, do you know what the number is for the little pond? I mean, it might be 20%, 25% of the low. It's big. It's big. Yeah.
I'd have to go. They are in the report. I don't think they're in the 20. The atmospheric numbers vary around from watershed to watershed.
Yeah.
But it's a real number.
Yeah.
I have a question. If we're thinking that we want to do things that get us to the point that we can do the accounting for what we're doing is helping for nitrogen
Yes.
reduction.
Yeah.
Is there already sufficient information about how these different systems are attenuating nitrogen such that we don't have to go out and build a demonstration to prove that? And it's more a case of
Yeah.
advancing to where would we put the systems in and then asking for the credit for the systems we
Yeah.
built.
Yeah, there is. In fact, you, in your memo, which I did read quickly because Eric passed it along to me, you quoted a couple sites that has performance
I'm
data.
just trying to get you to say it publicly in front of them.
Right.
As the expert.
The other one that is used most commonly is Mass DEP has a Stormwater Handbook Volume 2 that goes through all these practices, and they assign credits. Now the problem is they're just developing that information for the nutrients. Most of that stuff is with TSS because that's the one. But there is data there if you look at it. And there's a number. There's probably 3 or 4 really good sites to pull that stuff together. We just did a project for EPA Region 1, Rob's agency, in the Upper Charles River, which is one of the 2 residual designations in New England for stormwater. We worked with 3 communities. In that case, they were trying to reduce phosphorus, which is actually even harder, I think. And so we went in and worked with the Charles River Watershed Association and did exactly what you're talking about. We went through those 3 towns. We actually almost went parcel by, we did go parcel by parcel GIS. Then we went out in the field and looked at everything more than 5 or 10 acres or greater, commercial facilities, ballparks, et cetera. And we specified facilities for all of those. And then we used these matrices of removal rates. And again, believe me, EPA was looking over our shoulder very closely and had to come up with a cost. And I don't know the exact numbers, and I'm too scared to tell you the numbers anyways. They're high to try to meet their phosphorus removal rates. They're on the order of millions of dollars per year per community. But yeah, the answer is yes, that is definitely available. You don't need to do the pilot. I think you can rely on other people's data. And I'll also add, I'll also add that you can't go out and take 1 or 2 samples and figure how something's performing because of the variety of stormwater. So that's why you really need to rely on places like the UNH Stormwater Center and other research facilities, because they've been doing this for years. And you got to look at the long term, and that data is available. Yes, sir.
I was wondering, you mentioned that one alternative to the vegetated swells in these bioretention systems is wetlands.
Yep.
And since wetlands have a combination of aerobic and anaerobic processes going on, they not only denitrify the nitrogen, break down some of the toxic contaminants.
Absolutely.
Have people
Yeah.
studied the relative differences in those benefits?
Yes, there's a lot of published data on constructed wetlands as well, and as you can see from the UNH study and other places, very good performance data. They're a little bit trickier to build than the bioretention, and the other trick with them is you don't have the storage area. The bioretention is dry to begin with, so you can get the water quality storm, as we call it, in there. Constructed wetland, by definition, is full of water before you get there. So it's a little bit more of a challenge in terms of trying to size those facilities, but they do work extremely well. And there are people looking at the possibility of converting abandoned cranberry bogs on Cape Cod. We're involved in another study with the county looking at that as an option, as a stormwater treatment option as well. So I think that's something worth looking at for sure.
Typically, is
Okay,
there
last question.
a ratio, a rule of thumb of the area of the constructed retention area to the area of the impervious surface that it serves?
There are rules of thumb for a variety of these practices. In fact, those numbers are right in the stormwater, DEP stormwater handbook that I mentioned earlier. Nitrogen's a little tricky because the sizing numbers are again geared towards total suspended solids. And in Massachusetts, that means you either catch the first ½ inch, or if you're in a so-called critical area, the first 1 inch of runoff. And then that volume versus the watershed will give you that ratio. The problem with nitrogen is more of a continuous source. It's not as much first flush related, partly because it's in the rainfall. So as long as it rains, you're going to continue to generate nitrogen. And if a lot of the nitrogen in these types of settings come from lawn fertilizers. When we looked at the Upper Charles, the 3 biggest sources of phosphorus, and there's some analogy here to nitrogen, the 3 biggest sources are dog poop, 18% of the load, leaves, street leaves from street trees, that's 18%, and lawn fertilizers. Those are the 3 major sources of phosphorus in the Upper Charles. It's going to cost, millions and millions and millions of dollars to treat. Street trees. So one of the techniques is collection of leaf litter
There we go.
and doing something productive with it.
Scott, I want to thank you very much for coming. We know
We got a lot to do. I know.
we have a lot to do, but this is important, and you clearly know more about it than anybody else in Cape Cod. We're very happy to have you here.
Thank you.
And thank you for doing it on short notice.
And if you'll excuse me for leaving, especially to George and Matt, wherever you are, because I'm very interested in your project, but I need to rush off to Boston for an early class in the morning.
Understood.
I apologize for leaving. Read with interest your minutes.
Thank you, right. While the next group is setting up, I'd like to make 2 introductions which are completely unnecessary. One is our new member, Ron Zweig, who at the last meeting, he was sitting over there with a microphone, and at this meeting, he's sitting over here with a microphone. And he's been giving us his advice and counsel at every meeting since we started, so there was not much difference here, but now you get to vote. But nice to have you aboard.
Thank you.
And the former member, the seat that Ron filled, George, is paying us a visit, and we miss you, and we're happy to have you back for a day. We should take the shellfish thing out of turn, I guess, once I go, because these guys shouldn't have to stay all night.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we ready to go?
You're on.
All right, well, this is the work of our Eco Toilet Subcommittee. And George and Wynn have worked long and hard, as well as Earl and Hilda, and Janet, and Ron, and Christine and Wally, and myself. And this presentation is going to be very brief and not really get into a lot of the details, but we have a lot of the details in the papers that have been given to you. And I will answer any questions you have tonight verbally, but if you want the real details, you have to get into the documents. This is the vision we have. I originally wasn't going to do this, but Steve convinced me that we had to have some kind of an end game in sight. So the bays become cleaner in year 5 of the project. Shellfish and fish populations are up in each one of our bays. Local plumbing businesses are thriving because they're installing these eco toilets. They've taken on new employees. New businesses transform residuals, that's the urine and the feces, into saleable green products and create new jobs there. Residents find work in revived building trades and shellfish industries. And probably most importantly, neighborhoods remain stable and economically diverse. That is really why we're doing this. The methods. Residents choose from a menu of measures. It could be an on-site denitrifying septic system. That's been approved, that we know what percentage of nitrogen it removes. That's all been done by George's team at the base. Could be a packaging toilet, could be a urine diverting toilets, composting toilets, or a hybrid of composting and urine diverting combined. Interim and long-term residual management is set up to create a market for recovered resources. And shellfish farms established in most bays. How we get there, what are our objectives? We're going to have to verify nitrogen removal factors and get DEP approval. They're going to have to certify, they're going to have to tell us that we're going to certify a composting toilet for so much nitrogen removal. The same thing with the urine diverting toilets and everything else. We're also going to have to, it's going to be a sociological study. We're going to have to find out how people deal with this, whether they're ready to accept them in their homes and permanently, if they're going to leave them in their homes. We're going to have to estimate the average installation costs for different types of homes, and we should have a good handle on that after the demonstration project. We're going to try to set up a residuals recycling and management program, but you have to remember that's going to be more of a long-term project because it's going to take a long time to develop, and it takes, I recently found out that Sweden's been fertilizing wheat fields with urine for 20 years now, and they've had no health problems, and no public relations problems. And it's worked very well. But you need a lot of urine to fertilize wheat fields. So you're talking about a lot of people with a lot of urine diverting toilets. You're going to have to estimate the lifetime cost per unit of nitrogen removed for each type of eco toilet and the IA systems, which George has already done to a large degree. I guess that's ongoing though, right? Correct. This is a packaging toilet over here on this side. It really just takes each movement and puts it in a bag. These bags are biodegradable. They would be picked up by a little truck. Hopefully it's an electric vehicle. But that's ideally, these were originally made for miners. They come out of the mines. And it's very sanitary. It's all combined in one place. And very inexpensive. And on the right, you see the composting toilet. We're going to require 2-year storage at least for a composting toilet. Can't have any of the all-in-one in one room. You just plop it down in a room and use that. Those typically have a lot of problems. So we're going to require something like you see on the right. And on the right, you see urine diverting toilets, and it has a, you can see the bowl. Can everybody see that? The front half of the bowl is actually the receptacle for urine. There is a urinal next to that, and one of the storage systems. 80% of the nitrogen is in urine. 80% of the body's nitrogen that the body excretes comes out in the urine. Only about 8% is in the feces. Another 6% comes out of the kitchen sink, and another 6% comes out of the bathroom, shower, sinks, and laundry. But urine is 80%, and that's why we want to capture urine. Even if we have composting toilets, we may want to capture the urine and keep it separate. What else was I going to say about that? The only real problem with the urine diverting toilets is that if that's all you have in a room, then men standing up to urinate may miss that shelf, that front shelf, which would not be good for our study. So you can do a couple of things. You can put a target in there somehow. You can targets in there. Or
sit
or
down.
you have a urinal in the room. Like this one hanging on the wall next to the toilet. These will probably be the least, after the packaging toilet, these will be the least costly to install and probably be as close to a toilet, the usual type of toilet that we have in our homes now. The other thing about urine is that it's sanitary. There's only a couple of pathogens that survive in it, and those are tropical in nature. And after 6 months of storage, even those, the urine becomes so alkaline that it kills all of the pathogens that could possibly be in there.
Matt, you've got 3 different options sort of on the table here. Is it your recommendation to try all 3, or are you going to narrow it down to 1 and try 1? Or what's your plan with it in that?
We're going to, at least, we want to get the numbers on the urine diverting and the composting toilets, and probably the hybrid.
So, the 3.
Well, the hybrid is the urine diverting toilet inside of a composting.
Oh,
Is that on subsequent slides?
Huh?
Did you get to that on subsequent slides?
A picture of that?
No, to the whole, on subsequent slides, you're going to come up with the program, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Stay calm, my friend.
This is
trying to
the
move it along.
residual management that we hope to see. This is they make these eco drum composters. You can add to them, and they turn. And as they turn, all of your organic matter and even the urine can be put into that. Leaves from the town, so if you're going to sweep the streets for leaves, and you'll put that all in, and you get a very high-grade fertilizer out at the end. The other thing we can do with the urine is turn it into struvite. You add some, do you know what the chemical is? I should know. It's some kind of a magnesium they add to the struvite reactor, and you get a crystallized form of phosphorus and potassium and some nitrogen. And that can be ground up into a high-grade fertilizer. That fertilizer is has no metals in it, where commercial fertilizer does. It would be a commercial-grade fertilizer. Okay, the demonstration project for Falmouth is we want to install 62 installations needed by DEP to determine the nitrogen removal rate and get it certified. Okay, so I'm going to ask George to comment here on how that was, how we came up with that. I know it was in discussions with DEP.
Okay, the number comes up, the number comes up with 12 systems are usually considered for piloting, 50 are considered for provisional use in any new technology. So it doesn't quite apply, but in talking to DEP and saying, what would it take to really sort of prove to DEP the nitrogen removal efficiency? 62, the adding of the 12 and the 50 seem to be an appropriate number. And then looking at the data as we go along, it may be that if the data are really stable, that is, it's really tight, then we might not need as many. But at the outset, 62 seem to be the number.
Do they allow you to mix the different types to add up to 62?
No, it would probably be 62 of the composting toilet type. So that would include the composter and the composter with urine separation. Those two could be linked because they basically capture the whole stream. The difference becomes when you have a urine separating toilet, in which, as Matt pointed out, the sort of the issues where males standing up and maybe not everything's captured, and there's a lot more uncertainty introduced there, because what goes on in the gray water, which is, by the way, what will be measured, what goes on in the gray water will expect to be a lot more variable than what goes on with the composter and the composter with urine separating, because the gray water in both those latter instances is the same.
The one redeeming factor of the urine diverting toilets is that they're going to be easier to install in a lot of cases. And we would like to establish that factor. How many times on average, are men going to miss that receptacle?
Getting to sit down.
We want to offer a $5,000 incentive to cover the purchase, installation, and the $300 pump out. George has had at the Barnstable County Health Department, they have had an incentive program. It's a zero-interest loan to encourage people to install composting toilets. And you've had very few takers that we know of. I guess people would rather just put in something that they know and they're familiar with, the Title V system, which is what the program is, the Community Septic Management Program, that we tried to offer a better incentive for that. If desired, exemption from future sewer connection would be one of the incentives. And if you do get a composting toilet, it would qualify for a possible 40% tax credit, I'm sorry. And in most cases, you would qualify, but there's always some things that go on between you and your accountant that you'll have to discuss to make sure that you do get that tax credit. but that is available. Questions?
Would the 5,000 be taxable?
Would the 5,000 be taxable?
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah, probably.
And that, the homeowner has to take the costs out of that. The 5,000 isn't the homeowner's profit, so to speak. That's the
Oh, yeah,
grant.
it's
that they have
gonna
cover
cost,
all
the
the expenses.
composting toilet's gonna cost $5,000 out of the box. To install it, it's gonna cost another $2,000 or $3,000 probably.
But that's part of what you're trying to determine.
Right.
Matt?
Yeah.
The exemption from future sewer connection, did your committee discuss whether that was even possible to offer legally?
We discussed that. We at first thought that it probably would take legislation to enable that. But I think from what I've read, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, George, that it's up to the Board of Health? Is that
No, I think it would be up to the
legislature?
legislation.
Okay,
Yeah.
I thought I had seen something else.
Right.
Title V would not allow
Right.
it right now.
Title V won't allow us to. Okay.
Matt, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're going to offer these volunteers $5,000, but it's going to cost them more than that to acquire the equipment and put it in. What makes you think you're going to get any volunteers if it's going to cost the money to do this?
Well, we have volunteers now that want to do it in Falmouth.
Six- 62?
What?
How many?
I don't know. I don't know, but we do have people who have been in touch with various members of the committee and want to do it.
So you've been in it for a while.
Sure.
No, oh, sorry.
Sure.
Yeah, well, one thing, I spoke with Pamela Truesdale about can you hear me? I guess I have a
Yeah,
microphone. Yeah, I've got a microphone.
The
okay.
town can hear you.
Yeah, the town can hear me, great. Okay, I spoke with Pamela Truesdale from DEP's Southwest East Regional Office, and another incentive that we may end up having in Falmouth because of the urgency and the scale of the issue we have with nitrogen is that normally the septic systems can be declared dysfunctional or non-conforming based on hydraulics. That's basically the way it's generally done. But it's also possible through the Board of Health in the town to say that if they're not functioning in terms of nitrogen, they can also be declared as failed. And but that's through the board of the board. So that would be another incentive
Right.
for whatever system.
So then they could get a zero interest loan or a 2% loan
Possibly, or whatever, however that may
through the
work.
community septic management program.
Right.
Would, do you think that to try to draft whatever legislation's necessary for that future sewer exemption, kind of on parallel tracks, would be a good idea? Because I think that's the biggest incentive out there, and I have from the get-go. Because we just had a 60% increase in the sewage rates 2 years ago, and they're saying it's not enough. I mean, I would think that, well, I know this whole thing scares the hell out of everyone.
Well, yeah, I think between Eric and I, we can get that done. And
We're not there anymore.
but we could write it and get it to the right people. Steve?
Matt, you're outlining quite nicely what the program has to sort of encompass. So there's this legislation thing, the 62 installations. Would you be trying to line up? I just throw a random number. Try to line up 70 or 75 locations where people were committed to doing this, so you know you get the 62 before you started, or would you just get started and hope you got to 62, or have you thought that one out at all?
I think we're gonna, when did you want to comment?
I got a couple of things to say about that. We have been able to work with both George and other people have also suggested, I think Matt has suggested, that we may not have to do all of these 62 units in Falmouth alone. Number two, that we may be able to take some units that already have installed composting toilets and include them in the testing. If they have composting toilets, which quite a number of places on the Cape do, and even in Falmouth do, if they have a septic system, you can pump out the septic system, test out what they're getting, because you're not really interested in what the composting toilet is doing, you're interested in what the gray water is doing.
Right.
So we have ways of getting a number of different ways of getting them.
I appreciate that, but I'm back to the, you know, it seems as though that for the program to be done and to pass the litmus test with DEP, we need to have a number like 62, wherever that number comes from.
Yes.
And so I'm suggesting the program's got a greater chance of, you know, people embracing it or succeeding if you walked in there saying, we've identified whether there's 62 things that are getting incentives or 62 total sites. We've got enough, we're going forward, rather than getting out there and having 15 or 20, just reflected upon the fact that there's a program right now that there's few takers on. So you would want to make sure we had enough folks lined up.
Well, I think in some ways it could be iterative. If we figured, first of all, there hasn't been a huge, you know, the crowd's not knocking at my door at the county to get loans for this thing at 0%. So we do understand that there's a lot of reluctance on the part of people. So I don't believe we're going to get 62 right out of the box. If we can get 20 and the data starts showing real stability, in other words, there's not a lot of variability in DEP sees as we're going along, our monthly sampling at those sites that we've chosen show a fairly consistent level, then it may be that we might not need as many to demonstrate the efficacy for nitrogen removal. If the data are all over the board, well, they're going to say, we need the full universe out there. What's the range? What can we sort of assign for a number for nitrogen removal for people using composting toilets? So would we like 62? Absolutely. And I think you probably have a slide after that where we've actually budgeted and figured if you offered the incentive and did all the monitoring, this is what it would cost. We'd love to get them. If we don't, from Falmouth, we should look in other communities for opportunities for the sampling in representative locations so that we can develop the data for DEP. Ideally, the demonstration would totally be encased in Falmouth, and we'd have a nice short run to collect all the samples and have a nice data set that's nice and clean. But we realize the realities of it is that it's going to be difficult to achieve.
Matt, you mentioned in one of your early slides that calculating public acceptance was important, and I couldn't agree more. And so I want to repeat a suggestion I made before. If you have a system of bidding by a cross-section of people
Had this issue before.
to see how low they would be willing to go in terms of the incentive
It says it twice.
to do the demonstration, you would then have a perfect histogram of market acceptance as of now. You could argue that it would change with your further education, but it would tell you something. I mean, if you get 62 people that are willing to do it for 3,000, well, you save money, you can do it for something else. If you get 2 people to do that and everyone else's low bid is 100,000, that's telling you something.
Well, it's something for us to consider. You know, and I've heard you say this before. It's if you want to get an unbiased survey, it may be hard to do that with people who are self-selecting. Although if they get something in their home that they don't like, I'm sure they're going to let us know. So I think we can talk it over. But it's a sociological study. We'll probably have to get somebody with that specialty to help us design the surveys.
I have a question about the eco-compost, the rotating eco-composter that you're going to convert to fertilizer. Are you going to examine it for contaminants and emerging concerns after you start this process and stuff?
We could do that, although it's not yet regulated, as you know. But from what we understand, in Sweden, they found that most of those are organic compounds. And he's talking about the pharmaceuticals and things, the chemicals that come out of our bodies and come out in the urine, most of it in the urine. I think something like 60%, upwards of 60% is in the urine. And you know, what do we do with that? well, right now, we don't do anything, it all goes into the toilet and into our groundwater if you have a septic tank, if you have if you're on a sewer, it ends up in the sewer, in the sludge, and that ends up on fields or burnt at the, incinerated at the waste treatment plant out in.
I was just gonna make an observation, as you may know, that the Sierra Club actually opposes putting fertilizer that has contaminants of emerging concern on farmland.
Well,
And one of the members of the board of directors, Jessica Helms, that's her main issue.
okay, well, all I can do is
You're
tell you what.
definitely gonna get people's interest if you decide to go for it, this and totally ignore this issue.
What I can tell you is that in Sweden, they're using it on wheat fields, and they found that it breaks down in the soil, the organic compounds.
I'd like to add that we have been talking with Nick Ashbolt of EPA about this, and Nick has said that he is interested in exploring with us the possibility of using, if we get compost and urine available to him, that he would be perhaps, he can't promise this yet, willing to fund a study to establish the extent to which composting and urine diversion can get rid of contaminants of concern, various different things that are in it. So we do want to address this. And I'd just like to say that our own wastewater supervisor has said that he would like to see that done too.
Yeah, I think we're getting, if I cannot, with all due respect, we're getting off
Yeah.
topic. There's compounds of concern in our wastes
Right.
right now
Yeah.
at on-site systems. Whatever we're proposing to do is not changing the fundamental issues about compounds of concerns. We're trying to address nitrogen right now.
Right. If nothing else, it will give us a more concentrated form that we can handle and manipulate easier, more readily than you can when it's in a sewer.
Yep.
Or in the groundwater. And I was gonna say, these, the Econodrum composters get very hot, and that would break down a lot of that material too. Okay, in order to participate, you must use a system that's approved by the committee. Only eco-toilets can be used in the home. You can't have a conventional system alongside of an eco-toilet. You can't have a regular toilet upstairs and a composting toilet downstairs. We're going to have the whole home converted to composting toilets or a combination thereof. Septic tank must be pumped, and the sampling port brought up to grade. We pump it out because we want to get the nitrogen, an accurate reading of the nitrogen, not the residuals that are left in the septic tank. And the sampling port, as George mentioned earlier, is where we will pull the test, where we will take the test water, and that's just before the leach field, the T-box.
Do you have to do before measurements to characterize that household?
We're going to do a total of 12 measurements, we predict, and 2 before and 10 during. So we're also going to need the water records from the previous year and the years that we're doing the test, because the nitrogen is also a function of the volume of water that's going into the septic tank. So we have to know that volume as well as the concentration of nitrogen. Right, George? Am I saying that properly?
That's how you calculate the load.
Yeah, that's how you calculate the load. Residuals must be removed by a licensed liquid waste hauler, which are septic trucks. I also found out that the guys who do the porta johnies, they can pump out these things too. They have the same kind of license.
When you want these residuals removed, are you thinking of it in 2 separate categories, the urine separate from the other? Or are you thinking, with the current practice, is to mix them all together and take them away? Is that?
Right now, if we have separate urine stored, That can be, and there's going to be an interim. As I said before, we're not going to have this residual processing center up and running for years. But in the interim, that can be taken to the wastewater treatment plant. And they won't put it all, they won't just dump it in, they'll have to have a storage tank there. So they can put that in little smaller amounts as they need it. And from what I've heard and what I've read, the sewage treatment facilities usually get a high dose, a huge amount of urine in the morning because of people waking up. That makes their equipment work really hard. They have to build the equipment for that purpose. So if you can dribble it in over a longer period of time, it actually makes the sewage treatment plant a little more efficient. So that's probably what would happen with until this residual processing center is established. And of course, the homeowner has to provide access. They have to allow our people to go onto the property to get those tests.
How many composting toilets are there on Cape Cod right now, about?
Probably less than 50.
50?
Less than.
50, okay.
I'd almost say probably less than 25.
In private homes, or you?
Between private homes and some establishments like the Audubon and other places. I'm sorry, between Audubon and some of the other public locations and homes, I don't know more off the top of my head of more than about 10. So I'll say less than 25 or certainly less than 50. But what we will start to do is contact the purveyors of the systems to see whether we can look at their client base, to see whether there's representative folks there that we can use, not only for cost analysis, but also for the estimate of residuals. The whole idea of the residuals must be removed is so that we can get a sample of volume. We need to actually know how much volume each one creates, because that's part of the matrix, the calculus in the end of cost benefit. So somebody asked about removing the urine versus whatever. There's also a third, which is a composting toilet that uses a foam flush. That's a different volume. So we need to get all those volumes together so that we can figure out, okay, the average home would be this is what the residuals would be. If you had 1,000 of them, this is what you'll have to handle.
George? Following on to Ron's question about only about 25 on the Cape. Your first criterion, only eco-toilets can be used in the home, it makes sense, but most homes usually have 2 bathrooms, they may have more. So this means retrofitting and buying 2 eco-toilets for at home.
For the toilet portion, yes.
For the
But the main collection bin could be one.
Right.
I've seen it where there's 2 main collection bins because the toilets are offset at a greater distance. There's a lot of different ways to handle it. There's a vacuum system that can actually draw and send it to a composter. And, you know, there are issues with that we have to identify. Electricity goes out,
Right.
that vacuum operates on pressure, which eventually dissipates when used. So there are a lot of issues that need to be teased out of this, and that's the definition of a demonstration project, to do that.
I would point out that if anybody has been to Washburn Island and used the Wacoit facilities out there, those are composting toilets already, correct?
Yes, they are.
Yes.
So just as a point of reference,
Those are,
anybody that goes to Washburn Island, uses the Wacoit facilities, I believe is using a composting toilet.
they're Clivus Multrum.
But just as,
composting
when you're
toilets.
talking that there's not many on the Cape, there's a couple here already in Falmouth that are
They're,
relatively publicly accessible.
almost all of the state parks are using composting toilets. And I've been to them out in western Mass. And they're fairly, well, they're convenient and clean and no odors. And they have the photovoltaic cell with a fan that keeps the fan running. And I thought they were pretty pleasant. Certainly not like an outhouse or something like that. Okay, this is the budget that we would have for the 62 systems. Subsidies, $310,000, pumping out the septic tank, $18,600. Testing, the 12 tests per installation, almost $38,000. Mileage for the testers to get to these places, 6,000. Labor, about 5,000. Total of about $378,000. This doesn't include a project manager and outreach coordinator, which we think will be necessary to really market the system, market the program and make sure we get those 62 people and coordinate a lot of the things that have to be done with DEP. There's a potential for project collaboration, project expansion to other Cape and South Coast towns. I work for the Westport River Watershed Alliance. I have a proposal out there for funding this project manager and a project outreach coordinator. Again, we think that's going to be essential for moving the project beyond the initial stages. There are foundations who are interested in funding this. Any questions?
George, just come back one slide for a minute here. I happen to have sat in on your subcommittee on Monday night, and there was a little bit of discussion about this budget and a premise that the most efficient way to go about doing this would be through an alliance or whatever we call it with the Barnstable County Health Department, rather than going out into the broad sort of field of who's available. Can we talk about that just for a little bit, what the thought process?
When I was on the committee, and I'll disclose, I'm the county health officer.
Right.
We sample a lot of systems around the county. We have the health center, and we monitor the systems for 14 towns on Cape Cod, somewhere around 1,500 systems. So I only developed the budget based on what I knew, and based on our sort of universe of cost, which reflects somewhat of a subsidy to the citizens of Barnstable County. But believe me, you find somebody to do it more reasonably, do it. Put it out there. Because sampling on-site systems in this manner is a little intensive. The cost for the laboratory, which include the testing cost, I don't believe you'll get, because that does reflect a subsidized cost for TCAN, because we actually farm it out, but we do it in volume.
So that's testing based on the county's current rate.
Correct.
Okay.
And if you go out there, I would recommend the committee do that, actually, to go out and put this out to some sort of bid for that many systems. We based it on the full 62 systems, and I think our comments in the initial part of it is if we only had 5 or 10 systems, the cost per sample would naturally go up, since you're sending a person out and back, and you're talking a half hour, at least, half hour. If you're only collecting one in a half hour, you're done, you're cooked. So you've got to get 4 or 5 in an area and start doing that. So these were sort of not back of the envelope. They were fairly considered, but the committee should definitely put this out. I mean, 30B regulations, laws in Massachusetts would almost require that. But I felt confident that what we offered, and actually I wouldn't even put our department budget up there. I'd say this was a budget developed by somebody who does it, but certainly it should go out to bid.
So George, looking at these numbers, everything below the line that says subsidy are basically Barnstable County rates or estimates.
Well, the pumping isn't, but everything below pumping would be.
Okay.
Right, the labor, the mileage is 41 cents per mile. The testing reflects TCAN, ammonia, sampling, and I talked to DEP about we probably wouldn't have to do nitrate, which would be a calculation of total nitrogen. There's usually TCAN, nitrite. That adds a lot of it. That adds $20 on a sample.
The $50,000 that's up there testing mileage labor, is that over a 2-year period? Is that distributed over 2 years?
That's 12 samples at every location. And I'm going to imagine it's got to be over a 2-year period
Over a 2-year
because the sampling is over a 1-year period. However, all your installations won't go in on day 1.
Yeah.
So I suspect that most of the sampling will take place over 2 years.
Most of the sampling, all the sampling has to be year-round residences
Oh,
or
absolutely.
businesses, right?
Well, there is, we have discussed in the committee that there should be a number of seasonal residences, since that will be part of the universe of things that get installed out there. We'd like just, you know, to weight it toward the full-time residents, because that is, of course, the worst possible case. But the seasonal residents have to be in there to some extent, because that is part of our universe out there. And DEP will ask, okay, what happens with seasonal?
Okay, Ron.
No, it's just the costs basically then, they are based on you are now monitoring about 1,500 denitrifying systems on Cape Cod in the county,
Okay,
right?
let me clarify that.
Yeah.
We monitor the results from 1,500 systems. We monitor a certain number of systems, certainly test center, we're very clear on our costs for monitoring those. But we monitor the monitors, so to speak, so we know what the costs are out there, because we ask people what their service contracts are, what part of that is monitoring, and we talk to a lot of the service providers. We know their cost for sampling because they bring a lot of their samples to our laboratory, because we're certified for a lot of the analyses. So, yeah, what I meant to say with the 1,500 systems is that we're familiar with the cost of monitoring out there, and we believe that what's reflected here would be sort of that's
Similar.
not the base, but I would definitely suggest, you know, if you had 50 systems out there tomorrow, to put this out to bid, a company would say, okay, I can cost that right out. The way we looked at it is we're not going to have that. So it's a little bit more difficult to cost it out, because if we have 5 the first month, 10 the next month, now that's 15 at the end of the second month, another 20 the next month. That makes the costs estimate rather difficult to do. We just took a shot at it, and I supplied to the committee the spreadsheet, because they can fill in, and they say, okay, let's say we want to do a $2,000 subsidy, what would that do? And the whole budget will flip around. It's just like, you know.
You have that here, as a matter of fact.
It's a spreadsheet, you're welcome to use it, and even dig around with our costs. If you say, well, we should get 31 cents a mile versus, it's all in there. Everything's labeled, so you can play with it and figure out what you get. What I gave them is what, if a town came to our department and said, we'd like to do this for 62 systems, assuming some sort of a growth rate over 2 years, what would it cost? And that's what that cost reflects.
Right, and you do enter into memorandums of understanding with the towns on
Oh,
a
absolutely.
regular basis. Okay, that was another question. And when I showed my staff these numbers for the testing, we do a lot of testing in the Westport River. They said those are really, really low numbers, cost for testing. Okay, we talked about that. Here's the ideal sustainable house and landscape with chickens and gardens and trees, and this is Earl and Hilda's place. And this is our time frame. Program development, we're in that phase now, and we hope to be done by the end of June. We'd like to start gathering, we'd like to get some installations in and start gathering data by July 2nd, to do that for 2 years. The installations will go from August 31st through July 31st in 2013. And then phase 2 major installs, the major part of installs would happen in phase 2, which would be May 2014 through what's that, July 31st, 2015. And of course, this is just, I guess,
A lot of work.
Clarification, the installation's August of this year through July of next year. That's the 62 that you're aiming for?
well, we're going to try. I mean, we're going to start, but even that we think will take 2 years. Is that what we have?
You have 1 year.
1 year. Well,
We hope.
we don't.
This is-
It would be best to get it in
It'd
1
be
year.
best, yeah, it'd be best, over a year it'd be best to get it in.
Steve?
I'm reminded of the time when low flush toilets first came out, and they weren't very good. Now they're fine. But at the time they weren't good, people were smuggling the illegal kind in from Canada. And I didn't believe it the first time someone told me that people were smuggling toilets.
Right.
And so it brings up the issue of when you go to full scale, if you require a mandate, maybe this is premature, but are there any political or legal problems involved in enforcement of people going back to a standard toilet from an eco toilet, and thus
Well,
dumping
there
nitrogen in
will
the
be
ground?
one sign, and I think the town would have to monitor the number of times they have their, I assume you're talking about a urine diverted toilet. The town would have to know how often that is pumped out. I think we'd have to track that. We'd have to get a report. And if they stop getting their urine pumped out every
You know.
6 months or 2 years, about a year, then we're gonna know something's up. But that, hopefully they're not gonna replace their composting toilet once that's taken out and installed. That's gonna be another major job to replace that. So that's,
How many Title V systems are installed in Falmouth every year?
how many Title V systems are installed in Falmouth every year? I really don't know. It's probably down the last 3 or 4 years, obviously, but I know a lot of them are replacement septic systems. So we could possibly find out. I know we looked at that in Westport. We found out that there are about 77 replacement septic systems in a town that's 2/3 the size of Falmouth in the course of a year.
In the town report. That health department report would tell how many permits were issued.
So we should probably check that out,
It
because
seems
that's,
like those are 62 targets that,
yeah,
Yeah.
it's exactly, those are people that
No.
we market to.
Well, if I may, the trouble with that is a lot of them are being put in because the house is being sold. And
That's true.
it's a requirement when your house is sold that you have a certificate saying that you've got a working septic system. So if the test shows you don't, the new buyer might not be interested in being an experiment here. In all likelihood, the seller just wants the sale to take place and doesn't want to introduce an experiment.
I think that would absolutely be true in the majority of systems, but there are people who have their septic systems failed because they're pumped out too often, and that gets reported to the Board of Health. They would be a target audience for this project, if that's what you're saying.
my gut reaction says money talks, some kind of tax break for the next years if you buy this.
Well, we
Install
don't
this
we don't do tax breaks here. We're just trying
I-
to do nitrogen.
And give them more money.
Give them,
Yeah, the
okay,
incentive.
give
Give
them
them more money. I mean, it's just, if you want it done, then
Well, a couple of things on the money. You've got these 13 tasks. In addition to the actual costs of the installation and the testing. And it's going to cost a considerable amount of money to have an entity do these 13 tasks.
I want to speak to that. We talked,
Let me just hit the other
Okay,
money point,
yeah,
which
okay.
is, hey, the $5,000 does not include taking it out and replacing it with the previous system if it turns out to be unsatisfactory to the experimental home. And I think you're going to have a hard time persuading people to do this for $5,000 if they know cost of putting it in is theirs, cost of taking it out is theirs. You know, there's a lot of what ifs for people.
I'd like to speak to both of those questions.
Please.
One is we have discussed whether included in the total costs of the project would have to be a set-aside in the case that people had to have their systems taken out, either because we don't, after we've done all this, we decide that composting toilets won't work in Falmouth. We can't get people to use them, in which case we'd have to take them out. And the other possibility is that at some future time, there's some other reason why they have to be taken out. We could define a number of different ways. There would have to be some kind of set-aside for that, it seems to me. Not necessarily a one-to-one set-aside or anything like that, but some kind of
Yeah, it wouldn't cost as
contingency.
much to take it out, but we still have $122,000 left over in that fund.
And then to
That
speak,
could be used for that purpose.
to speak to the second point about, to your point about the cost of it, I think we talked a good deal about who would be doing all of this and whether we would need to have an RFP go out to have a company come in and do all this for us, or whether we would be better off hiring someone like your program coordinator to do it. We think we probably are going to end up having to hire someone. We want to talk with the rest of the committee about who the rest of the committee needs to hire to do our work for us, the whole committee's work, and whether we could combine those two together and ask how much, I haven't tried to cost out how much time it would cost to do all these things, but it's a substantial amount of work to be done.
Sure.
Probably more than in most of the other programs. So we ought to try to, in the next few weeks, we should try to get a clearer idea of how much time it might take to do this, what kind of time we would need, and how much that might cost to get somebody and work together with Matt if we could cooperate with him.
Right.
I'm just saying, in one of your opening slides, you also included, at least mentioned, the denitrifying, on-site denitrifying systems. And I'm wondering that when you're doing surveys, if you were going to ask people, would you include that on a list? Say, would you like to do a composting toilet or this, that, or the other? But if you did want the other, it may cost you more, but is that something that would be part of the on-site strategy? I know that, you know, either they're going to want to do the composting toilets or they're not, and if they are, then they'll be part of the.
Are you suggesting that we should add a $5,000 incentive for people who wanted to do the other or not? I mean, because I think people ought to offer.
I wouldn't suggest that necessarily. It would just be if they say, no, I'm not interested in a composting toilet, well, under this program, would you be interested in the other? At least you would get some data
Yes,
about
absolutely.
the interest.
So
Not-
you would tell them how much that was likely to cost as well.
You could tell them that as well, and then see what they think.
Then I'd get a figure.
Just looking through the literature that we have and what's out there, I detect more consumer resistance by far to the urine diverting toilets than to the others, principally because of this business about where you have to pee and where you have to arrange your body to pee. I mean, part of what we're doing here is separating good ideas from better ideas. And if you've got two ideas on the table and one of them has more resistance, I really think you ought to aim toward the one that has less resistance. The urine diverting toilets, I know it's a particular, you're an advocate for that, but everything I'm seeing suggests that it has less consumer acceptability than the others.
I actually think it would have less resistance in the marketplace because it's more like a toilet.
The phrase that I'm pulling out of the report that's actually in the current CWMP is, while some men always sit to urinate, others never do. The correct sitting position is difficult for many women and especially for children to adopt. The cleaning effort required is generally considered to be relatively large. This is the reason why they didn't do it in Switzerland. And there's
Well, you know,
the others are easier. Why don't you go with the easy one?
That was one study, and if you read my letters in response to that,
Oh, I have.
well, you have?
I remember back years ago when you were having this discussion.
Well, they took one study in Switzerland, and it actually was a favorable response from people in Switzerland in that study, but that wasn't reported by our consultant.
This was the actual study itself I'm reading from, not from the consultant's report.
Well, I'd have to look at the.
I'll be happy to share it with you.
The study that I've seen from
Anyway,
Switzerland says that there's a
Just a
favorable
suggestion,
response.
if there's one that has more consumer acceptability and one that has less, go with the one that has more. We're trying to get something that, at the end of the day, people will want to do here in numbers.
There's also the issue of cost, and the issue of installation. And again, the urine diverting toilets are gonna be far superior. I think it will pay us, and we've had this discussion, and I've been turned around completely, 180 degrees. I originally was just saying, let's just do the composting toilets. But once I've had a chance to look at the cost and the difficulty in installation, multiple toilets in a house, I thought, you know, we gotta keep urine diverting in the picture so we can get fair, you know, we can really figure out how people will respond to it. We don't know that.
I'd like to respond to that too. I think we have to keep in mind what the demonstration project is trying to do. It's trying to establish whether DEP, at what level DEP will all the demonstration project really is trying to do is to establish at what level DEP will certify toilets as taking nitrogen out.
True.
That's what we're trying to do. If we don't do that with urine diverting toilets, even if it's somewhat slower than the composting toilet, if we don't do that, then we will never be able to offer urine diverting toilets as an option to people who would rather have urine diverting toilets than composting toilets. So I think you're talking about the difficulty of getting people to be in our program of testing. And I'm talking about the long-term question. If this test is successful, if we go forward and have actually toilets as if we use them in large numbers, then I think we ought to have, Ron's question is a very good one. We ought to have several different possibilities that they can take so that we don't just get stuck with one. We ought not to mandate some particular thing. So that's the reason I think we ought to do the urine diverting, if we can.
The other point I made is that you can put urinals in the bathroom too. And the toilets have evolved. They're not, I mean, I don't know what kind of toilet they used in the Swiss study that you're citing there, but they do get better. They did get better.
Steve.
I'd like to offer this, and maybe I'm being a little premature. We've been covering this for an hour.
Right.
And I think that three suggestions might have been put out to your committee to either embrace or not embrace. And I'm gonna just try to summarize. One is this issue about, you know, what's the level of public acceptability around the systems and how to deal with that. And that's been there for a little while. Steve threw out there the idea of maybe is there a way of, you know, maybe one of the first things you do is a broader based survey, not just to, you know, a working group, but maybe a mailing to people in a couple of the watersheds. You know, we're thinking about doing this. What's your level of interest? If there was a $5,000 incentive against a $10,000 program, would you be interested? What if it was $3,000? You know, try to get some data back on that. And the third one is the one that I start off with. I forget what it is already. The thing about the 62 mat, right? I would suggest that perhaps you might want to consider that there's a certain starting threshold. You know, that you got to identify. I don't know if the number is 10, 15, or 20, but until you've got so many of them lined up, you won't go into the program for fear that you're dealing in such a small number that you don't get the momentum. And then, you know, there's also at some point in that program, you know, I think George, you were saying, if you get going and the data's not the data you need, is it because you're not ever going to get the data you need because the system's not giving you back the information, or is it just a case of getting more in there? So a couple of those sort of what I call safety valves in the, you know, if we've spent $200,000 or $300,000 but we're not getting the data we need, how do we know enough to shut the program down? If we're getting the good data, how do we push it to the next level? I would offer that.
I would only comment that I think the more, it's easy to do a survey, ask people questions about something that they don't know anything about because they never experienced it. I mean, how do you get a rational response? It's like people asking, well, there's plenty of surveys that I could come to mind that were questionable from the beginning, just from the concept. But you can't ask people what they think about composting toilets if they've never used one. So I would say, yeah, let's have some kind of threshold, but the more you get out there, probably the more, that's the educational experience itself. Neighbors are going to come by, see, they're going to want to see what it looks like, how it works, and you know, that the same thing happened with my wife. I said, I want to put in a composting toilet. She said, I don't know about that. Can we go look at one? And we went to Hilda's and we looked at that. And she said, that's fine. That's not, you know, that's fine. So I think there's certain snowball effect. The more you get out there, the more volunteers we may get.
Okay, David, David, I think we're going to limit the conversation to the committee members at this point. It's been an hour on this topic, so if you don't mind, anybody, any further comments from the committee?
Your manufacturers as a source of funding, you're doing them a huge service.
Just on this issue, David, don't be offended.
You're doing your manufacturers of the various alternative toilets a huge service with beta testing. I would think you ought to at least lean on them to contribute something to this. And if they're not willing to, that's telling you something about the industry. And most industries, people risk huge amounts of venture capital on all kinds of crazy schemes. And the other thing is, I'd like, before you started, I don't mean tonight, to hear more about the education program.
Yeah.
What you think constitutes sufficient education, how you do it, and what statistical people you've talked to, so that after you do the education and then do the survey, that you're willing, you've done enough education to do the survey, what's the timeline for that? What are the results? In other words, in keeping with what Steve Rafferty was saying about how do you know when to continue and when not to continue? Otherwise, it could go on indefinitely, saying, well, we just need a little bit more education.
Good points.
All good points.
Okay, any other comments from the committee?
Yeah.
Ron,
No, go ahead.
Virginia.
This is the first public discussion with the committee as a whole. I know you've had multiple subcommittees. I think you need to prepare a clear message for what you're looking for from the citizens of Falmouth. We have these kinds of toilets. Yes. We're looking for sites so that there's a compact message.
Yes.
And that there will be this sampling that will be done over a 2-year period.
Yes.
We've covered a lot. What I'm saying is I don't hear a crisp message coming out to the audience that's watching.
Well, this certainly wasn't crisp. I mean, it's,
No.
this is scaled back considerably from the information that we discussed and that we pulled together, so.
I understand.
We're trying to keep it.
All right. Ron?
I think I'm fine.
Okay. Well, it was a great presentation in many respects, because it's an enormously complicated topic, and you've managed to boil it down to a series of steps that you'd like to see the committee take, and we appreciate that. Thank you very much. All right, because we have some folks from the shellfish industry here, with the committee's consent, I'd like to skip down to item number 5, which I assume is why you're here, the RFP. Okay, but anyway, shellfish discussion about the draft proposed RFP.
If I might, you distribute around to the committee
Right. I think everybody.
an outline based upon our presentation last time, and I went through and made some fairly extensive edits. I passed some of these around. Did you get one of these from me yet?
Yes.
No.
Everybody know the one that starts shellfish propagation project?
Okay.
Proposed draft request for proposals.
It's got red lines on it.
Red is
Okay. The new version is this one with the red
Wait,
lines.
I'm not sure if I got that.
Do we have one more copy?
I don't know, I made several copies.
Okay, we're good.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
still have.
No, I
Here's more.
have that. Yeah, I have that. This, I don't know if this is, I'm trying to see how this has
Pass a couple up
changed.
back there.
Oh.
Pass it down, one more. If I could just use the work off that one. I have 2 more, if anybody wants.
All right.
And what I basically did was, from what you had, I cut in some more stuff that had been worked up by the subcommittee along the way.
Yeah, believe me, I had no pride of ownership.
No.
In my first draft there, it was just to get something
I
on the
apologize
table.
that I'm putting it right in front of everybody right now, but basically what I did is, I started from where they say, really we're trying to define, develop, and manage a program of shellfish cultivation focused initially on Little Pond. It's not necessarily this town-wide thing, it's focused on Little Pond with the idea that it's gathering information that propagates out.
Right.
The program's primary goal is to demonstrate the extent to which shellfish cultivation attains a measurable and replicable level of nitrogen consumption within the estuary. And then I thought, there are benefits beyond that. So the secondary goals, and these are pride of authorship here, really reflects back on a couple of gentlemen to my left, as well as the 28 other people that showed up with these committees and put things out there. But it's improved ecosystem functioning within the estuary, improved cultural and neighborhood ties to the estuaries through increased recreational shellfishing opportunities, and improved economic opportunity and economic value from increased shellfish harvest. So there's, beyond the nutrients, there's some other ancillary benefits that some might declare to be primary benefits. But, okay, and then stuck with the 3 tasks. The program is generally defined as looking into the literature, coming up with some graphical representations for acreage and percent removals. We had some presentations. You might have given one of them, Ron, I think, at the shellfish, of
Yeah.
acreage and stuff. So different ways of representing what would happen for different amounts of that. And then looking at quantifying that out a little bit to some of the other estuaries as well. And then the key thing here is, because it's the town that would be doing the work in Little Pond, through an agent, if you will, there's a shellfish management plan for Little Pond. It needs to follow the Mass Division of Marine Fisheries, special project permits. And then I listed, it needs to be done in close cooperation with the various entities that are involved. And I talked about, in some ways, doing the shellfish management plan for the Division of Marine Fishery to be very narrowly focused. But because we want to look at a little bit more, I'm asking that plan look at the different ways that you might be able to raise or propagate shellfish, the different pluses and minuses or risks with that. And then also included in that second phase is working up the sampling plan and collection plan after conferring with DEP, again, back to this nitrogen question, which is a little bit different than the Division of Marine Fisheries, what they will want to see to protect against sort of virus or pathogen propagation between the shellfish. They're going to be, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, but they're very focused on the health of the shellfish, not necessarily how much nitrogen we remove.
Health of the people.
Health of the public.
So one part of the management plan is we've got to focus on meeting the health of the people and the health of the shellfish criteria. But mixed in there, we want to make sure we're getting information on nitrogen, so we're asking that second task to work up that criteria. Then the third part talks about going in and doing it. And what I've got in there is some stuff having to do with the way you buy seed. And without picking the numbers, we don't have the management plan in front of us. I say it would be at least 500,000 and maybe up to 2 million seed over a couple of seasons. Try and grow it different ways or see how far it goes to measure it. And, I talked about helping with some outreach stuff. There's the ability to raise a budget up. If you look at those type of numbers, the cost from anybody who's proposing to do the sampling and data collection really won't be known until we get to a certain point in the project to define with DEP what that is. So I'm suggesting the RFP should carry that we will add that in. That somebody, at the bottom I said the proposal should define the suggested approach, but there's no way to put a cost in there initially, I don't think, until we go to the DEP and find what they want to have for a sampling plan around the nitrogen. So that would not be in the first round of how people came back in task 1, 2, and 3. But I think the other 3 parts, people could come in with an approach and a dollar number.
Okay.
And at least I can put together a little more detailed numbers. We should probably reconvene a subcommittee meeting, Matt, and do some budget work around what it would be. But my first back of the envelope shows me that we're well within whatever the allocation, the proposed allocation was.
What's 500,000 seed cost?
I think it's.
Depends what size you buy.
I think 4 million came up to $20,000. So I think we're in the
okay.
$5,000, $10,000 range to buy the seed. And then there's gear. Then there's the cost of the gear.
The gear.
And then there's the cost for people to go out there and check up on it. But I think the numbers worked out when I did it the first time.
Okay.
Reasonable numbers.
Reasonable, okay.
Sort of the first pass at this was like looking at 4 million seed. That started pushing us towards the top boundary, and I figured it would come down based upon the feedback at the last meeting where you said, we should make sure we can really grow the things first before we go crazy.
Right.
So I'm suggesting whoever makes a proposal can talk about what they think they need to do and price it out accordingly. But I think anything less than $500,000 probably is not going to have enough there to start with to really get good results that are viable, okay?
Okay.
The other side of that is there is quite a bit of data about an attempt to do something like this at Lonnie's Pond and where they had some problems with propagation and success, so.
Are you envisioning the same entity doing all three tasks?
I'm fine with, you. I thought you had set up to say if somebody could do the first they could propose, people should propose on at least the first 2 tasks and/or the first 2 and the 3, or just the 3. I think you had it
that
back and forth, because I think
That's my concern, because the first two are a different kind of thing than the
it
last
could be
one.
different,
I-
or they could be the same entity. So I think, I don't think we need to, yeah, go ahead.
No, I think that this needs, I think we should probably table this at this point. We can consider it. I mean, there's some general inputs right now, because there are a lot of elements to this that need ironing out through the subcommittee, I think, at this point. There's some very good points in here and elements, but there are things that are missing. I mean, one of the concepts is that to make this really happen quickly would be to work under a municipal permit and then licensing under it for the DMF kind of guidelines. Right. For the production side of things to growers, and they could be supported in a certain way. And the other thing is there's no monitoring program here, and we've talked about a general overall, but this is specifically going to need monitoring for disease, for water quality, for different aspects. There are a lot of elements that aren't here. The consultation program is mentioned, but that really needs to be fleshed out, because the abutters, as we know from Pompanesett and other places, you do have this, and we really need to. I attended the T-Ticket Civic Association's meeting last fall and started briefly approaching the idea, and there was a lot of interest. So it's sort of like getting it in, but suddenly if they're thinking about this viewscape issue and all these other things, we may get tremendous resistance in a way. I mean, maybe, as Ron Smolowitz was discussing, the idea of putting some floating or some units in to see how they're going to do in the short term. That would be a good way to approach it with relatively small amount of funding to see if they survive. I think that also the Conservation Commission needs to be involved in this as well, which is, there are just little details, many things in here that I think really need to be elaborated on and really specified a bit, and then breaking it down as you suggested, Eric, and who does what, how is it going to be worked out, and will it really be under the Department of Natural Resources sort of as the sort of the overseer in a way, and coordinating and doing things like this, and maybe hiring someone to assist with that as part of the program. But it seems that there's so many elements in here that are good, but the red print helps a lot from what we had a little bit ago. So it's tough to digest something so quickly. But I really think that this whole thing of looking at it from an engineering viewpoint and a nitrogen viewpoint, all of that is very important, but it really is something that's got to be done with a lot of consultation and discussion, and that needs to be done like months in advance before things really start going in at any scale. And that's not really defined here. So I think that for this, and it's better now that it's Little Pond, a plan for Little Pond, as opposed to a town-wide plan that you had before. So it's moving, I think, in the right direction from my viewpoint and experience with implementing projects of this type, a number of them. So I just think that it's good at this point, but I really think we need to have a subcommittee discussion and to come up and kind of flesh this out. That's what I would suggest.
Virginia.
I want to follow on. I think you've made some excellent points, and I think we are headed in the right direction, but just from the things you've just ticked off, I do think a subcommittee would be the most productive way to handle this. And I want to reiterate again what Ron Smolowitz said about, would anything live actually in Little Pond, because it's in tough shape. And the point that he made was that we have to have a management plan before we can put the first cage in. So the management plan has got to be a really high priority. And I thank you for moving this in the right direction, and obviously, I think with your input.
I'm not going to argue. I could argue that the way I've written it, that everything you both have touched upon
Is already in there.
Is intended to be in there.
I understand.
But I would suggest that it should go back to the subcommittee.
Yep,
Get a close
get closer.
rereading in committee
Yeah.
before it comes back to the full Congress.
Committee of
Am I,
30.
am I hearing that you would like to be on the shellfish subcommittee?
At least,
You've attended as a citizen prior to this. I'm just.
Well, let me put it another way. You are on the shellfish subcommittee.
No, it's fine, I mean, I'm happy.
You are,
But
okay, fine.
obviously, it's in my,
Maybe you
it's
should
in my
make a
marrow.
disclosure in public now
Yeah.
that
Right,
you're a
right.
member of a.
Yeah, I'm actually president of the Cooney Western Farm Foundation, which could possibly have interest in doing something with this. It's very speculative right now. But in terms of how it worked out, or something would be, how that would work out with what parts of this would be helpful. But we don't have any specific plan at the moment.
There's actually something further on the agenda that might help with that regarding who's going to actually draft these RFPs, and it is not going to be us, I hope. So that might give you a level of comfort around that issue. But am I hearing it's all right with the subcommittee chairman to take this back with your new member and the old member?
Absolutely.
And can we ask that you would be bringing it back at the next meeting for a vote? Part of the trouble is we want to keep these RFPs moving. We could talk for a year about the intricacies of all of them, and nothing would happen. We aren't being, we weren't put here to do nothing. We were put here to make progress and make these things happen. So that,
In fairness to everybody, this only, I put all my edits into it. I incorporated edits like literally this afternoon
okay,
on the timetable.
Spoken like a true chairman.
all right.
Eric,
So,
ask one
Steve,
question?
sure, absolutely.
At the last meeting, when you presented the first version of this, and then Ron Smolowitz spoke, and he emphasized the great profit potential and the substantial number of people interested in harvesting that potential, as well as harvesting the oysters. That the thought was that just perhaps the bids on this could be negative. Or in other words, what the person gets paid
How
is a
much-
long-term license.
How much will they give us?
Yeah, was that and I thought there was a lot of agreement on that at the time. It costs the town zero by definition. Can the subcommittee speak to that next time?
Virginia?
I think he was thinking about the bigger picture. For Little Pond, this is really to see if we can figure out the mechanics of it and the ratios and whether, if the ponds are in bad shape, they can even grow shellfish. I think he was thinking more about the other ponds in the rest of the town that might have the potential. Little Pond is really our nursery. It's where we're going to get this idea off the ground that there might be nitrogen removal, or enough nitrogen removal to be meaningful. And we need to keep that key goal in mind.
And you don't think
So-
somebody would be willing to do that in return for a long-term license?
And I don't think we want it. I think at this point, we want to have a project that achieves the goals that the town is looking for, and then whether we make money on it comes later in Walk Boyd or Green Pond or so
Sure.
on.
Matt?
Yeah, I just want to add that this is so polluted that the shellfish will have to be removed
Yes, that's right.
after they're grown and then
Right, take them.
Purified.
transplanted, so
Right.
they're
Yeah.
purified. There's an enormous amount of labor involved that we can't even, I wouldn't even hazard a guess on what that would be worth. So to think that somebody would do this for nothing, maybe just the product of the shellfish it's not there yet. It's not in Little Pond, I can tell you.
But he makes a good point that, again, it's implied here under task two, that we'll look at the economic impacts of the program and whatnot. We maybe need to, when we take it back to committee, be a little more explicit under the task two component of this, how people are gonna look at assessing the financial benefits or non-benefits of the program over time. But I think getting out in the first year, just to demonstrate that things will grow there, and their efficacy in nitrogen
That's the key
attenuation
thing.
there.
That's the
Where
key
it goes after that, there's economics down the road once you get through the first proving out the nursery concept.
Gotcha, Ron?
Just, yeah, one thing in terms of the budget, that it would be, you know, to get it started and how it would be done if it were a municipal project, basically, that I did a calculation that there have to be redone, okay, but to an extent, through a process, but that for the 200,000 that was allocated for this in terms of the production, that you could probably remove about 12.5% of the excess nitrogen in Little Pond, 10, 12%, something like that, for that funding, for the equipment monitoring, all that kind of thing, okay? Then the labor would be coming from, the payment for labor and that kind of thing in that model could have been coming from the sales ultimately from the product. So to get it going, to get it set up, to get the monitoring, to get everything in place, it's for about 10, 12% of the nitrogen, excess nitrogen load, that's about what it would cost. It doesn't mean, I mean, this is just a calculation, and things are changing all the time with where sources of funding may be coming from.
All right, so discussion has taken place. It's coming back
Next meeting.
in a more refined form at the next meeting.
Okay.
And we can move on back to item 3.
Check your calendar, Wednesday or Thursday next week.
Oh,
I'll go home and post the
We
meeting.
can do that afterward.
Yeah,
Let's not hold up.
you can do that later. Okay, the collaborative has proposed to fund a consultant to assist us in drafting RFPs. The person that, the guy's name is Mike Dominica. He is with CH2M Hill, which is one of the big consulting firms in the world, and in this world, on this issue and these kind of issues. Steve and I met with him and with Jerry last week. The collaborative has money to fund at least the beginning of his work, and if later on it turns out we have to share a cost, at least we got something for free. His firm would not bid on any of these RFPs that he works on, obviously. There is one that they might want to bid on, which would be the PRB RFP. And if that's the case, we would probably want to have GHD do the RFP for that one. If anybody knows what I'm saying by now, they're doing well.
With all this.
Got it?
In any event, so the premise here is we're being offered something for nothing that we need very badly, and we ought to take it, I would say, unless there's any other opinion. Steve, you were there.
Yeah, if you want a motion to accept the free money,
You bet.
I'll
Does
make the
this
motion.
gift horse have teeth? Did you look in the mouth?
Did I look at his mouth?
You mean good teeth or dangerous teeth?
What is
that
his-
can
Is it
take
a
either
shark or
way.
is it a horse?
Mike Dominica.
He has a contract with the collaborative to do this kind of work for towns. It's one of the services they offer that we obviously should take advantage of if they're offering it, I would say. So I heard a motion to accept this kind of offer, even without looking at the teeth.
All right, I will second. I think our committee's responsibility is to develop the key elements that we want in a request for proposals, which is an RFP. But any request for proposals has a structure. I've done it many years in business, so there's not only a structure to putting out the proposal itself, there has to be a structure for how you review the proposals when they come back, so that you compare apples to apples, and you need to decide on how you're going to judge qualifications. So it's a fairly involved process in order to arrive at an equitable decision, because sometimes the companies that propose are not happy when you choose somebody else. You have to be able to defend your decision. So we do need some technical expertise to be able to carry out this step. And I think
the second step.
to actually get the proposal out. So we develop the key elements, but you need somebody to package the whole document, and then it has to be advertised. There's a certain process for that.
Right. Jerry left a little memo describing what this guy would do, and it's
Okay.
pretty much what you're saying.
Oh,
The
good.
level of effort would be provided by the collaborative and dependent on cost and extent of involvement. The town may need to cost share some of these. Once we have a concept, we send them to him for refinement. He may be able to provide assistance with estimated costing. He goes on, but it's essentially what you said. It's a complicated thing, and this is what they do, and if they can help us.
Another way I'd express it, in keeping with what Virginia said, I look at this person as an administrative or executive officer. We still have to do the basic thinking.
Well, that's right.
You never want to contract out your thinking. And we go to this person for all the legalese and business hints and requirements to make this a working document. But the substantive stuff has to come from us.
Exactly.
Well, I just wanted to
We have a motion, I'm waiting for a second.
I seconded it.
Okay, good.
I just want to get clarification from Virginia. So you have experience in receiving the
Proposals.
RFPs and evaluating them. I don't have that, so you could, do we have to get another consultant to help us evaluate it, or can you set that up for us?
Well, I can, there are two ways to do it. One is purely price, you just buy the cheapest proposal. The other method has more to do with qualifications, and you basically go through the proposals and decide which proposal is the most robust, complete, seems to understand what our needs are, and you choose on that basis, so it's based more on qualifications, and you then open your price proposal. So they've provided them in separate envelopes, and then the price proposal is what it is. So you,
Makes sense.
and so that is a key decision that we would need to make. I wouldn't, again, suggest we not make it tonight, but it is a choice that this board will have to make.
Just one thing, there isn't any, in terms of Mike Dominica, is there any procurement issue with just hiring him directly? I mean, because he's free is one thing, but there might be other free people that are out there.
No,
Is there a
he's
way-
already under contract to the collaborative. We're a member of the collaborative.
Right.
It's
I
a
see.
service that's available to us as a member. We're fine
Okay.
with that.
Would it make sense to have Mike come to the next meeting and outline
What
the
he-
procurement,
Yeah.
what the procurement process is and what he would be
Yes.
What do you
doing?
what do
so
you
we get a
expect,
little
what
bit
he
better-
needs from
I mean,
us?
I think, I go along with what you
Yeah.
sort of said, that there's a couple of different models,
Right.
Sure.
but he may say, these are the ways that we go about it, and this is the sort of stuff I would need to get.
And if he has a work product, something that he's done already, I think it would be useful to look at that.
Yeah, and then there's also the discussion about how do you form a selection committee, who's on the selection committee, how do you
That's
make
correct.
those evaluations? There's several parts to it, both
Right.
organizing it and then
Yes.
doing it.
Correct.
Plus, he can give us the various procurement models, right?
Sure.
The
Right.
various
Sure.
options, because some of these things may be different.
Sure.
Yes.
Different. They may not
He
be the
also-
same model.
He also should be prepared, we should know, how many free hours are we getting, and how many hours does he think it'll take per RFP?
Fair enough.
In other words, is this a rare commodity that we have to husband really carefully, or is there a moderate amount of it that we can dole out to each of the subcommittees?
Well, we should
Because
get.
it would be stupid to give each person 15 minutes of his time to
Right.
pick a ridiculous
No
example,
question.
as
But-
opposed to giving it all to one subcommittee.
We'll talk about getting him here at the next meeting. That would be good. Okay, there's a motion made and seconded to accept the collaborative's offer to supply consultant assistance for the purpose of designing RFPs for the, motion made and seconded. Further conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? We got it. Okay, a couple of sort of significant things going on here. And I have a handout, which I think you have a copy of, which looks pretty inscrutable. It's the one that starts with the word in very small type, reduction strategies and program for delivering the CWMP.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Actually, this is to be read as if it were in Chinese. 'Cause you start at the bottom of the other page and work up. It's a series of emails, back and forth. And Nick Apostolides was one of the people who was at the conference that was at the Falmouth Inn, which several people attended a while ago here. And he's the vice president of the consulting firm that is currently employed by the town to write the RFP. And we had a good conversation with him about his consulting firm and how we've been working with them and how we'd like to see some more working with them than we have had. He has volunteered to put on with experts from his company and beyond, a workshop with us in Falmouth the first Saturday in April to bang out the CWMP strategy and model and what they can provide and what we want them to provide. And I think it'll be enormously useful, if nothing else, as a way of bringing this town's consultant, the local people, into the mix that we've all been discovering is a lot different than what they've been used to doing as far as CWMPs. So I'm bringing it out here. I'm seeing heads nodding. I don't think anybody would think it's not a
Has
bad
he
idea.
spoken to Nate?
Oh, yeah.
They know each other. exist?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Oh.
So,
He's Nate's boss, but about 18 levels above.
clarification.
And he has different experience with these kinds of things.
Right.
Quite different.
Yeah, so I think it'll be enormously useful because the firm, Nate used to be a fairly local firm and they were bought up by this global firm. The global firm has a lot more experience in the kind of thing we've all been talking about here in Falmouth than Nate's firm did previously. So I think having him agreeing to bring the expertise of the whole company, the global company, to Falmouth, not just to talk in abstract terms, but to talk about our CWMP, will be enormously useful.
Yes.
Matt?
So just a clarification, he's of the same company as Nate?
Same company.
So I thought maybe you were talking about going out to rebid for...
This is free.
Okay.
Another freebie.
So-
It's free. They will pay for bringing who we need, and they will devote a Saturday to us and the town. It'll be presumably the committee, Jerry and the town town officials.
This is an open workshop, though.
Free for all.
It's open for the public to watch. It's not open for participation. The participation would be the committee and the consultants people and the town people.
So the intent is to take where we're at with the draft CWMP and sort of go through it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Go through what we have now and go through what we want to have
What
for the rest.
needs to be
Make sure that
in there.
Right.
that the firm understands where we're at.
Right.
And they understand what needs to be into the draft when it goes in.
Exactly.
So there's no miscommunication here,
Right,
because we need to get them to finish up that.
That's right.
plan. Okay.
that's right.
The one thing, in looking at the company's profile, they do just about everything,
Yeah.
okay? They're really broad.
Yes.
Maybe, I'm not sure about what Scott was talking about tonight, how much they're aware of that kind of runoff things, but he's obviously knows a tremendous amount. But on shellfish, that's kind of an odd fish, and not too many companies have that. I haven't seen anything in aquaculture with that company, so it's something that may need, if he can bring people in or something like this who have that as part of it, that would be great.
But the first step will be meeting with him and Nate and the town and the committee to plan exactly what we want to have there. And then April 7th is a date that works for him, and presumably it's a Saturday.
So there'd be considerable going back and forth before the meeting to
Right.
define what the agenda
Right.
is and what we're
Right.
going to talk about. Otherwise, it will
Yeah.
be like certain other workshops that won't be named.
So that is, I'm hearing consent on that one.
Yes.
Sure.
Right, put it on your calendar.
Do you need a motion that we accept the offer?
Sure, let's do that.
Okay, I move that we accept the offer for a
Second.
workshop on April 7th.
Made and seconded. All in
Seconded.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed, we got it.
We didn't have any
My only
discussion.
point was gonna be is that Nick is working for that part of GHD where they help to bring in a lot of interests into the process and look at an integrated strategy. So the types of things that you're talking about here with the subcommittees, plus what you saw with Scott Horsley tonight, plus shellfish resources and other factors, he'd be that kind of interested in that whole kind of picture, is to go forward with what the town might do comprehensively, looking at this.
Okay, so that's another free thing, and a very good one. State legislature's statement re wastewater. Everybody saw this in the Sunday Cape Cod Times.
Crisis solved.
Crisis solved. What?
Crisis
We can go home. The legislature has handled it for us.
Where's the money?
Well, I was looking for that. Yeah, you see the page got cut off?
Well, in reality, they do now have a infrastructure plan. It has yet to be voted on. It probably will not be voted on this year, and it will come up for a vote next year. And in that, there should be money.
Well, we hope springs eternal.
When I saw this in the newspaper, I was asking myself, is there any reason for us to try to, now, it's relatively soon, to contact our own representatives, the representatives in the legislature who have to do with Falmouth itself, and bring them in and ask them what is going on, how they see it, and so forth?
I think they would be asking us what is going on. I think we've been spending a lot more time on this than they
It's
have.
a little early, and there is no
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not even gonna get the money for schools that we hope to get, so.
Yeah, realistically, we've got our job to do, and at the end of it, we may need their help on some possible changes in state law. And we heard one,
School petitions,
you know,
so, yeah.
any number of things we may need their help on, but right now, we haven't defined it, and I'm not sure they're prepared to do anything except offer encouragement, which is always nice.
Free.
And also free.
Free.
We accept their offer. Salt Pond MEP report is something Jerry wanted to talk about, but he's not here, so I think it's fair to not bring it up tonight.
Move that we table it.
Put it on for next week, or just table it for now and see if it comes back at all.
Question, Mr. Chairman, you skipped over number 4, was that on purpose?
Oh, no, actually, it wasn't number, it's PRB. Discussion of the draft proposed RFP.
I move we accept it.
I second that.
I think we do have to be careful because of the listening audience that we are tending to throw around a lot of jargon
True.
and people don't know. Okay, so PRB is permeable reactive barrier. And we're thinking about a request for proposals, that's the RFP,
You're right.
that would help us move forward. And this, Steve, this was,
Steve's the chairman.
But
Okay.
Steve is the author of this.
okay.
I defer to the other Steve.
Yeah, well, I mean, my reaction to this, again, without getting down to the complete details of the PRB plan, if we're going to proceed forward with developing an RFP, I think this captures the principal tasks that we would want to
Okay.
do there, and it flows out of the presentation we made at the last meeting, so.
Okay.
Again, I would hope that as we develop RFPs, there's, you know, a chance to nibble on a piece of the apple, maybe not take a big bite out of it, but if we wanna add or tweak a little phraseology or whatever.
This consultant that would be coming, I think we would ask him to work first on the shellfish RFP. That's my sense. Do you have any sense that this needs to move ahead of that?
I think this is less seasonally dependent than a number of other activities.
Okay.
This one might be easier to put together and get out.
I think we can share with- I
It's
think
less
I
complicated.
think we can share it as an
Yeah.
example, but in terms of
Yeah.
focus,
Well, it's not Mike Domenica himself, it's people in his company, right? So there's no reason they couldn't do things in parallel.
I think that it's a question of his company might want to submit on
Yeah, this
work.
one he may not.
That's
wanna
right,
be involved in.
that's right.
So
So
so this would be our own consultant doing the language on this one, if
Good point.
Dominica came back and said his firm was interested.
Yeah, but I think if we can get him to come in and do the discussion about
Yeah.
the forms and the types of proposals and evaluations.
Okay.
Well, is it your sense, or anybody else's sense, that this needs additional tweaking, or where do we go here? I hate
Well,
to-
this comes, I guess I would go back to this. If this gets, the only reason I'm saying, it might be useful to have the discussion about the types of procurement.
Okay,
Because if we're going more to a qualification-based procurement,
right,
you outline what you need in the tasks you see. And
Okay.
usually say, people can elaborate those tasks or talk about additional tasks they feel are necessary in their proposal. And sometimes in receiving the proposals and reading the proposals under that basis, you get much more of a sense of a firm's understanding and expertise, you might have, oftentimes get to what I would call, as you've done this, Virginia, that aha moment. You say,
Yeah.
this isn't a firm that we had on the radar that would be proposing, but boy, these folks really have come in with a good approach to this. If you go back more to the, give us a price,
Right.
and we'll take you on price, then you've got to get much, much more detailed about everything you want them to do.
Right.
So it's in the price. And if we're going more on the, what I would call the qualification-based professional service selection, this provides, in my view of the world, bullets of tasks and the, the objective of tasks and the expected products of the tasks, but how to get from the objective to the end task is up to the proposer to define. Okay?
Yep, that,
And you're confident that once you do that, there's a mechanism to keep the price reasonable? Once the person knows
Yeah, we're
that
gonna get
they're
back
the
to those.
chosen person?
But usually you would say, there is a budget of $100,000 or $50,000 for the, to select a
okay, so
consultant.
it's
You
the
typically
reverse.
identify a
Okay,
budget.
yeah.
You
The
identify a
best
budget.
proposal for the price.
You don't tell them the price, you say you want them to submit their detailed proposals, they'll be evaluated, and we'll select the best firm. And then you open up the second envelope and see if their price is a price you can live with.
and if it's not, then you don't proceed. You either revise your
But this is what we want to,
RFP.
we want to come in and explain that
Or
whole
you could
process.
go to one of the other proposers.
Let's do that at the next meeting, so we come in and explain
Yeah,
some
yeah,
process.
yeah.
You ultimately open everything. But yeah.
But I wrote this up on the
Okay,
on the premise that we'd be more likely going with a qualification-based selection than a purely price-based selection
okay.
for these type of analyses.
There's quality and cost, though, they can be.
Would it be appropriate to accept it in some form or fashion? I like to
Together.
keep moving these things forward rather than just putting them on the list to discuss again.
You want to make a motion, Steve, as the chairman of the committee?
Yeah, I move that we approve
The proposed draft.
the
scope.
proposed draft scope of work. I'm not sure what you're saying the next stage is.
But all we need is the motion right now.
It's gonna have to be crafted into a request for proposals
Right.
that this board thinks is a
Right.
good document.
Right.
So it is gonna look very
Of
different.
course, it goes from here to the consultant, it comes back, and we get to see it before it goes to the selectmen.
So the consultant in this case would be GHD?
But, well, it would.
Or it might be the town.
Well,
Oh, GHD, I'm sorry,
GHD, right.
GHD.
Yeah.
So many initials going around, I lost
Right,
track.
the town's consultant who would be the one
Because it
doing this
can't be
one because
CH2M.
Right.
the others might not, got it, okay.
Yeah.
They said they won't do it because they might be interested in proposing.
Okay,
But-
so I move that we accept this scope and
Right.
discuss with GHD putting it in final form.
Fine,
Guess it, yeah.
you got it? Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye,
Opposed? Got it,
Abstain.
okay.
okay.
I abstain.
Fair enough.
I haven't had a chance to look at this in detail.
Yeah, I'm gonna abstain too. I don't have, I
Okay.
didn't have it to read.
Let's see now. Didn't I send you one this afternoon? Or was that the other, was that the shellfish?
No, you sent it, but I didn't have a chance to get to
Oh.
go through it. So,
It's going to come back.
Right.
yeah.
Well,
Okay.
our committee would welcome any suggestions for
Okay.
improving it, which you have ample time to give us.
Okay, correction and adoption of minutes. Did everybody get the minutes from last time around?
Yes.
So move. Oh,
Oh, any additions or corrections?
I did have one. Steve, Steve Layton, I was gonna ask you, on page 2, where we were talking,
I don't think I have the minutes here.
okay. Well, what's written is the nitrogen return on investment, but I think actually our objective is the cost per pound of nitrogen removed.
Yes.
That's what
Yeah,
we're,
that's how we phrase it at times, so that would be
Yeah.
correct.
okay. And so you have that when you get down to item 5, what is the cost per pound of nitrogen, and you need the word removed in there. You need to put that same wording up in the fourth bullet, where you have instead nitrogen return on investment.
Oh, so it would be,
Same words in both places. Cost
Cost
per
per
pound
Wait, did we vote to accept this already?
of
Oh,
no, we
The
didn't.
minutes?
Cost per
Yeah.
pound
No, the
of
minutes, I thought I was
nitrogen
looking at
removal.
this. Okay,
Yep, no, we're
sorry.
doing minutes. Okay, I hear a motion to make those two amendments. Are there any other amendments to be proposed for the minutes? Okay. Motion,
Move they be accepted as amended.
all in favor?
Second.
A second, all in favor?
Aye.
I abstain. I was absent.
Fair enough.
I was here, but I
You
wasn't.
weren't,
You,
you weren't a
you
member.
abstained.
So I
You
abstained
can
too.
abstain too, okay, fine. Okay, we're there. Couple of reports. Virginia has one, she and maybe others met with the local comprehensive plan group last week.
Yes, Wynn and I met with a subcommittee of the planning board, and they're working on the local comprehensive plan goals and policies. And the particular section that they were looking at is the water section and the wastewater section. And their intent is to set policies, which they said would have a 50-year time frame, and then to work on policies and guiding principles. They gave us the goal statements for the water and the wastewater, and I'm going to read those in a minute. And then they had a series of bullets with various policies. We didn't spend too much time on the water, and I think there was general agreement on the water. But when we got to the wastewater, Wynn and I gave them so much information, they realized that they really needed to go back and think more. So basically the ball is back in their court. Their goal statement for the water was that Falmouth shall provide its residents with a high-quality water supply to meet the present and future needs of its population, which is a pretty, general motherhood goal. Couldn't disagree. Now their goal on wastewater was interesting, and you'll see why. Falmouth shall protect the health of its citizens and water bodies from the harmful effects of wastewater by sewering where appropriate. And that was all it said. And so obviously what we're thinking is there are additional things to sewering. So we suggested that they add by sewering where appropriate, or implementing effective alternative methods of removing nutrients. So that's back on their table to consider, and the policy bullets underneath, I would say is at this stage in such draft form that we'll wait to see what's next.
Why don't they just wait till we're done?
Oh, that's a thought.
I don't get any sense of urgency on what their timetable is. It just so that they just happen to be working on this, and that's why they invited us in.
Yeah.
Just a quick question on that. You might want to use the word reducing nitrogen as opposed to removing nitrogen.
Okay.
Because of the
Okay.
inlet, the subcommittee
Yes.
inlet was looking at tidal exchange. And
Right.
so you
Okay.
may be looking at just reducing the concentration as opposed to removing it.
We actually also said nutrients rather than nitrogen because we were also thinking other ponds. But reducing that's a good suggestion.
Okay. And you were there, I guess?
Yes,
There.
and Virginia was masterly in
Thank you.
telling what we were trying to do and making it clear to them that there were some omissions in what they were talking about.
Can I ask who was on that committee?
It was Jim Fox, Pat Kerfoot, and then a relatively new member of the committee. It was a man, and I'm sorry I didn't, Robert maybe? But he didn't say very much. He listened the whole time.
And the town planner.
I'm sorry, yes.
Right.
What was her name? I don't
Brian Curry.
No, assistant town planner.
What's her name?
Marlene. There we go. Marlene.
Assistant town planner.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's assistant town planner.
All right. I'll report on, my Tuesday was spent up at DEP with the town's leadership in the permit issue that we're having over the wastewater treatment plant. And it's still a conversation, but I think it's fair to say that there's been a serious meeting of the minds on a lot of the issues. One thing that we've met now twice with the DEP people from Boston and Lakeville and Barnstable, and they are extraordinarily focused on the work of this committee. They every time they want a full-blown presentation about what we've done, where we're going, what we're likely to do, and what's our time frame. They're very, I think they see us as sort of the model town as far as doing this kind of thing, but they also want to see a time frame. We've been backing and forthing with them on the time frame, and we will have a time frame that'll be enough time for us. But until it actually gets reduced to paper, I'm not supposed to talk about it. But the bottom line is, we will have a product by a certain date, and we will have enough time to produce that product. One thing that we may have to include in it that we hadn't thought of much before is at least some reference to the other estuaries, the ones that have had their TMBLs and the ones that haven't, and sort of what not to have an answer or even much of a series of questions about those, but at least to recognize that they're in Falmouth and that they are something that will be looked at in the future. Steve will be on the next meeting talking about the Oyster Pond subcommittee, which will kind of be a model of how we're going to deal with all the others, because they're all similar to Oyster Pond in that they're isolated and far from any treatment options like the plant. So they may all turn out to be sort of the Oyster Pond model rather than the Little Pond model. But in any event, they're very interested in what we're doing. It's astonishing to me how interested they are in what Falmouth's doing, and the level of interest in the department, as witnessed by the fact EPA has been to every one of our meetings.
Just a couple of good ones.
But bottom line is, what we're doing is going to serve as a model, I think, for the rest of the state, if not for other states as well. So we will do it right.
I just might also say that observing the process that you're going through right now and speaking with the Cape Cod Commission and some of what the regulatory agencies might be looking at, and you started to get at it a little bit in here as to how far you go with each subcommittee before you know you've gone far enough, is that whole notion of adaptive management and how you're going to apply that. So there's where you would bring in all the subcommittee work and how you might apply that in talking with or speaking with these agencies as to what your plan would be and how that would progress. That gives it the focus, I think, on giving some comfort to the agencies that you know in regard what you're doing when you're going along the way, but also to understand that you have decision points that you probably have to make along the way. It's how much further do you go at that point with each of the different plans as to know whether or not it works for you.
Can I make a comment?
Oh, sure.
I find that a very interesting statement, because the DEP has spoken about adaptive management, and I presume EPA as well. And when it was originally presented to the town, and I was on the original study committee, if you look at this map behind you, all of the colored areas, all those southern peninsulas and more actually, were going to be sewered. And adaptive management was going to be applied to the area above the area that's going to be sewered. So all those watersheds north of Route 28, that's when adaptive management was going to come into play. And what has happened is that this committee in the town of Falmouth has really shifted that paradigm and said, we're going to look at a certain amount of sewering, we're going to look at sewering for Little Pond, but we're going to look at adaptive management techniques now for those other peninsulas. And that is one of the key things that needs to be changed in the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan, so that that message gets out to the regulators that are sitting above us.
Right, and then you extend that to say basically what your plan would be, each of these subcommittees, that you understand where you're going to try and make your decision points along the way, etc. And I think that that's what the agencies, you know, I understand exactly what it is that you're saying. That's my picture, and that's how it's been presented, I think, all along. So I think that that's important.
I think it might be better to phrase it saying that we're going to look at the most sort of technically appropriate and effective means an economically sound way of going about resolving our water quality problem. I don't know if we're committed at this point to any particular thing. We don't know how it's gonna come out at this point. Even for Little Pond, it's not 100% certain. There may be some things that can be looked at, may be more cost effective than other things, and may be effective. But one thing was wondering from the EPA, you know, one of the policies at the EPA is this this water quality trading policy. Okay, and how do you see that from the EPA's, you know, as applicable to the range of things that we're doing here? I mean, is it something that the oysters could be, I mean, is this, would that, you know, so much nitrogen goes into oysters, so we're trading kind of taking, you know, toward the TMDL or whatever, however it may work out. Is there, yeah, I mean, what is your viewpoint on that policy relative to this scope of adaptive management?
That question came up the other day. I'm just trying to recall who brought that up, and that was internally at EPA when we were just speaking about different projects and elements. Where you have a situation where you have wastewater where you need to get rid of 100% of the wastewater loads in some of these estuaries, that the trading becomes a little difficult, because then you've got to remove even more from the upper reaches of your watershed, if that's going to be the case, because you've got to trade from one area to another area, so where you can take those trade-offs. But I think, Ron, that what you're asking may be a little different, because you're asking, I think, where do you take the trade-offs between the different options that the subcommittees are looking at? Is that what you're asking?
Well, I'm just trying to see, in terms of that policy, how it fits into the scope of the work of this committee, say, and where it would fit. Is there a way, because I've seen a paper on how aquaculture fits into that policy. It's a concept note on that, and how it could be, and there are certain factors, because, you know, some of the criteria are
There's quite a bit of trading, so to speak, nutrient credits. And right now, in the Connecticut River Valley, there's quite an active program in doing that, where you're looking at taking more nitrogen out of the upper reaches, taking more nitrogen out of the lower reaches and then the upper reaches. If you can get more nitrogen out of that, you know, you can begin to trade off the amount of nitrogen removal by each of the different treatment plants and how expensive those upgrades of the treatment plants would cost. So, and of course that comes into effect, you know, in particular, where we're looking at the cost of those nitrogen trade-offs.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we're certainly hoping not to have multiple treatment plants trading off.
I'm thinking more like what Scott was talking about. Let's say that they put in, we've got the stormwater runoff thing happening, and we end up, you know, we say you need to take out 100% of the septic effluent, okay? But instead now, 20% of that nitrogen load that otherwise is coming in through runoff is suddenly captured and managed. That's the kind of thing I'm thinking about.
And this is why I think the work getting together with GHD, perhaps, and working with Nick and looking at some of that, that's exactly some of the questions you want to ask him.
Exactly.
You know, that kind of trade-off kind of questions. That's very important to do, because, and it's a great example that you use Scott or Horsley and Witten with regard to tonight's presentation, because you do have that perspective of going back and doing some additional scenario runs with MEP. And that's a great kind of question to look at with those scenario runs with MEP. All right, because that's where you're going to be able to see where you're going to get trade-offs. Because when you're looking at these lower reaches of these watersheds and looking at 100% removal, you're looking at more than 100% removal, because you've got to get rid of some more, because you've reached your nitrogen level in the lower part of the watershed. Now you're going to have to probably take out some of the nitrogen, perhaps in a more comprehensive approach of getting nitrogen out, perhaps also of your stormwater.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask, and this might be, you might think of this as rhetorical, is it possible that the EPA could fund Scott to help us with some of these projects in our area? You know, since he's done so much work.
Some of this work that Scott has done has been done under what we call the Non-Point Source 319 program. And yes, that would be a good conversation to have with our 319 people. Every year, the state gets 319 money and tries to apply some of those funds to local projects. That's a good discussion also to have with DEP and taking a look at this more comprehensive approach, especially if you're talking to them about a comprehensive wastewater management plan. You want to be talking to them also about controlling some of your other sources of nitrogen, which would have an effect on how much you would have to take out of the lower portions.
Since you're here, and you work for them, maybe you could have the conversation and report back.
I'd be
as
happy
to
to.
what the prospects would be. 'cause
I'd be happy to at least start that conversation, so who your contact should be about that.
That would be terrific.
Yeah.
Okay. Before I let our nationwide television audience go to bed, I wanted to make sure to get a word in for Amy Lowell, who is the number 2 person over at in the wastewater part of the town. She represented the town's interest at this meeting with the DEP on Tuesday, and she was magnificent.
Yeah.
She knew more about that plant than anyone knows about any plant in the United States of America. And they didn't have a question that she hadn't already asked and answered at least twice before they even thought of it. She was just stupendous, and they were just bowled over by her capability and competence. And people should know that we have people like that working for the town of Falmouth.
Yes.
Matt?
Not something new. I just want to make the announcement that Dr. Nick Ashbolt is going to be at the Falmouth Library March 17th at 10 a.m. And he's from Australia. He's worked in Sweden. He's pretty much the expert on these alternative toilets, eco toilets. So that's free and open to the public. And again, it's 10 a.m. March 17th at the Falmouth Town Library. Dr. Nick Ashbolt from the EPA.
That's a Saturday.
Saturday morning.
In this
It's
job, there
early in the
are
morning,
no
so
holidays.
hopefully.
Evacuation day.
Especially green, yeah. Very appropriate.
That's right, it's not nitrogen in that water. There's a motion to adjourn will be gratefully accepted.
So moved.
So moved and apparently seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Wednesday or Thursday?